And we are live. This is Dark Journalists. What a fantastic crowd we have out there and the ideas from already. Of course, tonight I am joined by the lovely Olivia.
Hi, everybody.
And Olivia, dance all night, play all day. Don't let nothing get in your way. Shake it up. And shake it up is the big theme now for 2026. And I'm going to show you why, because we're going into deep, deep waters tonight to solve what's going on with artificial intelligence and the global technology takeover mixed with the UFO threat, and then hankering back there, lingering in the subconscious memory, is the mystery school warning relating this to the second round of Atlantis. It's all going to come together tonight in this very special episode. This is Dark Journalist X Series episode 210. It is Atlantis Tuaoi, Ahriman, Transhumanist Terror 2026. And inside of all this, of course, the mystery school warning, anthroposophy, the Cayce work, and theosophy. Deep, deep, deep tonight. We're going to understand a number of things, but this is what's going to take us into 2026. I want to remind everyone tonight, we're going to be taking your questions in the second half of the program. We'll go a couple hours with you here tonight, and you can ask those questions at any time during the broadcast. Miss Olivia is going to put them together. We have so much to get to tonight, but first, Miss Olivia, what's going on? What's the temperature out there?
Great. David Donaway has been hilarious tonight, and he's starting out the show by saying, "Sorry, I can't do that, Dave."
Little 2001 magic. Well, I'll tell you, they predicted this AI wave all the way back with that movie. They were giving us the hint there. And of course, Hal develops human feelings and attempts to dominate the space situation dramatically. And that doesn't go very well for our friends up there in space. But it was a very keen warning about how far the technology can go and what's going to happen in relation to it. Tonight, I'm going to give you some shocking examples of just how far they've gone on the technology side, what they're attempting to do, and how it's bleeding now directly into the mystical, and how dangerous that is for us as a country, as a world, as a community of developing people. And it's very interesting to me that the figureheads they've put up there, in some ways, the figureheads themselves are personalities so that we can lock into them, and you know, you end up hating on them and missing the real piece. So it's not so much about the individuals, and I want to make that clear. I often say this, and I remind everyone that investigative journalism is adversarial by its nature. It's never personal, however, can't be. And even when I've mixed it up with certain people, you know, it's never a personal thing. But I will say this, that there is a deplorable aspect to what so many of these tech leaders are doing. And unfortunately, the leadership is completely upside down in terms of what we need to lead us through the 21st century. This is a big problem, and that's especially so on the technology side. On the political side, once in a while we get some relief, like the relief from the invasion at the border, things of this nature. So some of those things have turned around, but they've given a blank check to this technology takeover. It's very dangerous. I'm going to explain why. And there's not going to be any stones left unturned tonight. Some wild mysteries in the heart of this that go directly into the work of Edgar Cayce and, of course, anthroposophy, the work of Rudolf Steiner, warning us a good deal over 100 years now. You know, the warning was about 100 years ago, and then in the Cayce work, more around like 80 years ago. And we're going to get into all that tonight as well. And as a kind of an interesting little aside, I'm going to go over some of the carnage from the Age of Disclosure documentary, how it came out. We did a good job in November putting out all of the kind of rebuttals and the really deep criticism of what they were doing on the CIA side, putting out this UFO disclosure movie as part of a UFO threat push that we've demonstrated on this program. And we've kept a very close eye on their operation in relation to that. And of course, we'll keep a very close eye on it going into the future. I do want to say that it's my opinion that since releasing Age of Disclosure, the documentary, on November 21st, the day before the anniversary of the death of JFK, the 62nd anniversary, in fact, of the president's assassination, that I think they failed because although they had the dramatic media push, although they had CNN on their side and Fox on their side and everything else, in the public arena, there was a failure. And a part of that comes about through the fact that we were able to deliver a message about it, and a number of people picked up on it directly out of the ideas room. And, financially, whatever, they might do very well with it. You never know. The CIA always has write-offs ready because they're always a lost leader on that. There's tons of cash back there as long as they can control the narrative. But this is a little bit more important, I think, which is the thrust of the thing, which was, to surrender all your rights into looking into this to a group of intel agents and agencies that have lied repeatedly, and that the public in many ways knows very, very little about their activities. This was a crucial thing to push back. And it's quite fascinating because apparently the key interview in there, they had James Clapper up front and all these disgraced intel people. But one of the key interviews they had in there comes from 2022, and it was Senator Marco Rubio. And they asked Rubio about it in a Fox interview. Did you hear about this disclosure? You're in it, this documentary, Age of Disclosure. And he said, well, I saw it and I was deceptively edited in that movie. Now, this is very important because, it shows the ethics going on behind the scenes with Dan Farah, who, as I've pointed out, is simultaneously Lou Elizondo's agent and Steven Spielberg's producer. Very, very bad combination. And I will say this about what Rubio said. I think that he was really, putting it where it was on that he didn't want to be the person who was supporting that particular documentary. It's very interesting, too, that he did not go on record saying, oh, yeah, that's great or whatever. A couple of key things that he put on the table with this. One was that, no, they deceptively edited me in there, which you could imagine after the fact. And then this thing coming out 3 years later, they're probably like, he won't even remember. And then two, he was saying, no, that wasn't what I was talking about. So then he went into the whole foreign adversary thing. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Fox Channel that his comments in the new documentary Age of Disclosure appear to have been selectively edited. It's extraordinary, isn't it? This is probably they selectively edited everything to make it look more and more menacing as they went along. We have to really have an incredible eye on this because this is what they do with the UFO threat operation. And we need to be incredibly vigilant around what they send down the pike. Remember all the hassle and the hype around 3i Atlas, which now appears to be going on its merry way without any fanfare. Well, let's not forget this group of CIA people who are trying to peddle a UFO threat with this documentary. And I think they're going to fail with it, but a very, very dangerous attempt in any case. A few other interesting things came out of that. One of them was, I tweeted about this too because I was starting to realize that all the worst people had gotten their hands on the UFO file subject, not just the intel agencies, but like the worst media people possible. And of course, the pop click podcast world. So you're not getting the really deep, potent, hardcore information. And this was kind of the cream of the jest right here. Eyes on the Sky. Brett Baer takes a deep look at unexplained accounts. As soon as I saw this, I said, uh-oh, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. Please, Lord, tell me this is a dream, a bad dream, and let me wake up immediately. So they have these people out there who just don't have any interest in the subject. And it was interesting. There was this woman on News Nation. Is it Ashley Banfield? I think it is. And she was saying, hey, guys, what's going on? I need you to check out this list of topics that we're going to do as soon as our UFO episode runs and all this stuff. And then she's like, what are you guys interested in? Bigfoot? Dragons? Government birds? All this weird. I was like, what is going on here? This woman doesn't have any interest in any of it, but it's Conspiracy Inc., right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole fail around the whole thing. For me, when I look at that, what I see is people who are opportunistic, who don't care about any of these subjects, but they are glomming onto them and they are astroturfing them because they're going to run them all the way into the end zone. for influence and dollars. But the thing is, it doesn't help the public because the public gets an incredibly non-potent message, and it's not deep. It doesn't help. So I do think that when looking at this, we have to adopt the idea that you have a lot of posers on this particular subject right now, and that most of what we're hearing about it is going to come to a head because the AI aspect with the UFO aspect for 2026, the way I'm looking at it, with the incredible money that I see, and I've got all this behind the scenes detail of the podcast space and who's pouring the money in and for what, and how Peter Thiel is brimming right at the core of this and creating the narratives, and some very, very strange things that came out. So we're going to be in a much better, we're going to know a lot more by the time this particular X series episode is over. And of course, the Atlantis Tuaoi stone, Steiner, or Cayce mystery school warning piece is going to be just extraordinary. So before I go any further, what have you got?
Some other guy says, I've been waiting all day for this. And Karen Carpenter says, the Eighth Sphere and Ahriman, my favorite dark journalist topics. Let's go.
Yeah.
She also says, my YouTube 2025 recap says Dark Journalist is my most watched channel. 52 videos watched last year. One a week. I'm loyal.
I love that. You know, someone just sent me something like that where they showed that they got their roster thing. They're like, look, Dark Journalist was my top show for 2025. So I really love to hear that. Some other guy, isn't some other guy 60 songs? Some other guy now. All right. I want to get us into space early, and then I want to jump around into what's behind all this. But let's get a little hint of some money in space. And maybe if I bring in the podcast money with the space part, it's going to make some sense. Okay. Wall Street Journal. Most of this is Wall Street Journal and Fortune magazine, which I have to say deliver hardcore information because they go after financials, and financials are very important in what we're looking at. Even when you're dealing with the mainstream, those people like the money to be exactly where it says it is. SpaceX in talks for $800 billion valuation ahead of potential 2026 IPO. X-steganography. Remember, we pioneered it on this show. We revealed it on this show. We showed how it was going to come about. SpaceX, the deep X connection. We've shown hundreds of connections in relation to this, but I want us to keep an eye on the X-steganography in relation to the technology in space in particular. Very interesting surprise tonight. Company's CFO told investors about the transaction IPO plans in recent days. This is happening. So SpaceX is now, they are taking the stock into space, as it were. And if the valuation starts at 800 billion, it's going through the roof as soon as that thing goes public. This is going to be a huge move. Now, something interesting happened on the way to the bag for SpaceX. Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, has explored a deal to build a competitor to Elon Musk's SpaceX. I've kept my eye on Altman for a number of years and the things he was doing, and I was trying to figure out, because I know that they all have an X technology connection, where his would be. And tonight I'm going to reveal where it was, because this is something that I think is quite fascinating, and it shows the original company that funded him is right over here in Harvard, and they are an X company. But the OpenAI CEO has publicly talked about the possibility of building a rocket company and the potential for developing data centers in space. He's going head to head, and so the secret space wars are now becoming public. Remember, he's the leader of AI. He's going into space. Musk, the leader of SpaceX, has his own AI with Grok. The combination of the space secret aspects mixed with the AI secret aspects are going to be explosive here tonight as we get into it. And just for more kind of interesting X fodder tonight, precise properties of 4-quark particle offer clues to early universe from CERN. Okay, but that's the particle they found. Take a look at that and see that, Miss Olivia. That is an X. It's quite fascinating.
Interesting.
Very interesting indeed. I have a CERN special coming up for December. And I'm waiting for one other guest to get on board with it, but this thing is going to be huge. But the X steganography comes in hardcore tonight, and it's going to be important for us to understand what it is. Now, it might seem like this is unrelated, and yet it's not. Layoff announcements top 1.1 million this year. The most since 2020 pandemic, Challenger says. Challenger Gray and Christmas said layoff plans totaled 71,000 just in November. Massive cuts still going to bring the total up to 1.17 million for the year. This is a very important headline, in fact, because already we're seeing the effects of artificial intelligence and what it's doing to the job market. And though you have the billionaires on the top saying, oh, money's not even going to matter anymore. Don't worry about it. You know, everyone will live in a free paradise or whatever. In that case, hand over your $800 billion IPO, Musk, if you want to talk like that. And they're looking for a $25 trillion valuation for the Tesla. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the inversion of these terms also, and how we're kind of in the exact mirror opposite world of what should be and what the real Tesla would have given us, etc. All right. But how about your brain? What about your brain? Can they get into your brain? How about that? What do you think of that? They're going to get into your brain. Well, I'll tell you, tonight on the psychic side, we're going to talk about the silver cord.
Ooh.
And that gets into your brain. It gets deep into your brain, and it's all about how the psychic aspects and the seat of the soul, as it were, are described in the mystery work. So I was very, very interested in what Musk was doing with Neuralink. And a couple of weeks ago, I exposed the fact that he'd been talking for years about how this is just to help people who are in some kind of paralyzed state, and this will be a miraculous technology, et cetera. Miracle, miracle, right? Okay, great, great. And then he says, but you know, the higher purpose for Neuralink is to connect people with machines. And if somebody, you know, just volunteers to do it, we're going to have that little chick right there in the brain, and you're going to be able to link up and do all this stuff. All you have to do is remove the skull cap and slip that little chip in there. Yeah, the living internet right in there with the silver cord. There's a reason for that. So, Fortune magazine. Musk has long been interested in the concept of enabling telepathy with a brain-computer interface. So Musk has long been interested in the concept of enabling telepathy with a brain-computer interface. In a lengthy illustrated explanation, he outlined the idea. His then new company, Neuralink, Musk advocated for thought communication between people. Quote, if I were to communicate a concept to you, you would essentially engage in consensual telepathy. You wouldn't need to verbalize unless you wanted to add a little flair to the conversation or something. Yeah, because why should anybody ever talk again, right? But the conversation would be conceptual interaction on a level it's difficult to conceive of right now. Musk told Tim Urban at the time. More recently, Musk discussed Neuralink's telepathic ambitions on the Lex Friedman podcast. Quote, entire new ways of interacting with computers might be unlocked. Refer to the potential improvements and the accuracy of Neuralink's device. And then Musk replied, and also with other humans, provided they have that they want a Neuralink too. So they developed these patents, and one of them was called telepathy. And what it was actually, if you drilled down, was this whole piece of you would be with your chip able to send a message to that chip. And it's basically like, you know, like you have your iPhone now and you send a message over. It's the same thing, except you are doing it with that chip in your brain. It's not real telepathy. It is technology assisted telepathy. Strangely enough, it's going to come back around in the anthroposophical work tonight. This is something that Steiner predicted exactly, and what the cost of it was. We're going to get into that tonight. Tonight is going to be a barn burner of a show. There's no other way to put it. Everyone, it's great to be here with so many of you in the Ideas Room. It's X Series 210. This is the Tuaoi Atlantean Ahriman Atlantis Transhumanist Terror 2026, starring your big tech bros and going deep into the realm of the mystery with our own big bros like Edgar Cayce and Rudolf Steiner. This is gonna there's a little part in here that I think is going to open up exactly now what they have in store and what 2026 is the kickoff for. And that's where Genesis Project and all these things come together. But we have to go back if we're going to understand any bit of this. This is the vision, by the way, our friend wants to bring to bear. Again, in Fortune magazine, the illustration, the brain chip. Oh yeah, it's going to help anyone who's paralyzed. But then, you know what? We can also make it so that everybody gets it, anybody who wants it. Yeah. And now here's the sad thing. Here's the stat that I don't like giving out. 10,000 people have signed up for the telepathy Neuralink chip. They want it. 10,000 regular people who just want this thing.
It's amazing how many people want to be a guinea pig.
It's
Science.
absolutely
It's incredible, especially after what happened with COVID.
I mean, opening up your, it's one thing to say, well, hey, I'm taking this experimental vaccine. That's bad enough. You're going to open up your skull to these people?
On that note, Michael Skelton said, wait, DJ, didn't Musk claim they can embed the Neuralink using a syringe now to inject the chip via needle?
Well, that's not what the patent says.
Okay.
So yeah, they might have all kinds of things on the drawing board, but the idea of him squirting a syringe of Neuralink in there doesn't feel any better somehow. But I appreciate the comic relief as well. What else you got?
Fixed Text says, what could possibly go wrong? I don't know why people don't think of that. Worst case scenario. You always have to consider that.
Yeah. Well, this is, it's disturbing on so many levels. And one of the things I want to say is that, they have a very interesting thing going on with Musk because they have him involved, of course, in SpaceX. They have him involved in Tesla. And they have him involved with Neuralink. They have him involved with boring, going underground, Nevada and other places, and creating these superhighways under there. He's become the interface for all of these different things. And so you're not really dealing with one person there. He's just the front person for all of it. So we have to look a lot deeper. I'm going to read a little more about the brain chip and then Optimus, and then we're going to see how it rallies with all the info we're going to bring to bear here tonight. Okay, the telepathy trademark application specifically includes descriptive text. And I want to say this is telepathy. This is Musk's telepathy trademark. Okay, now, inside of the trademark is, quote, downloadable and recorded computer software and hardware for us to use in relation to assisting the technology. Yeah, so if you're going to run the brain, they have to be able to send the stuff in there. It's a little bit like Stepford Biden. Okay, while Musk has previously indicated that telepathy would be Neuralink's first product aimed at helping people with paralysis, the application suggests much broader ambitions that could include enabling telepathic communication between humans equipped with Neuralink implants. Trademark attorney Josh Gerben notes that, quote, the ethical, privacy, and security concerns surrounding thought-based communication and control are immense. Yeah, hello voice to skull, going public. So they are immense. This guy is absolutely right. And the ethical part is the one I want to highlight here, because this is where these people escape off into the woods with the ethical part. That is exactly the place where the public can call them out. And we have all of the tools, legislative, legal, executive, to bring to bear, put the public pressure in order to do something like that. So, very often people are wondering, what I can do, what can be done about this? One, first, to be aware of where they're going with it. I'm going to give you the roots of it tonight. But two, to understand that the tools are there to do this. It's not, they always try to make it seem like, the public can't do anything, or if laws are passed, it doesn't count. It definitely counts. And in relation to the tech thing, overreach, there's always a pendulum swing back. We've seen that. Even Microsoft got investigated and broken up to a degree. And they did a false, slap on the wrist for Google and others. But there is that possibility to bring to bear. So we should use all those tools and not be so cynical about the system that we don't use the tools that are afforded to us. Okay. Musk previously indicated, yes. Trademark attorney, boom. All right. Now, Optimus. Now, I put out something about Optimus, and I just, picture says 1,000 words. Here is Steiner's vision of Ahriman here, which he sculpted himself. Where's my trusty red pen, Miss Olivia? All right. So this is the famous Ahriman sculpture. And of course, showing it, it's a dramatic, it's always been a very dramatic image. And Steiner basically said that when he was doing it, he felt like he was being embedded in a very thick granite concrete kind of thing. These are the Optimus robots, which are supposed to, be available on this incredible scale. And the other thing is the kind of technology that's involved with developing these things. You talk about destroying the environment and things of that nature. These things are just completely unnecessary, first of all, but they're going to build them in mass and eventually just build robot armies. At a certain point, Musk, when he was talking about the company, he said, well, I'm not going to set it up so that they can build a robot army against me. So it's crossing his mind what they're going to use this stuff for. Yeah, what do you got?
Jessica Rodriguez says, if a computer or phone can be hacked, then so can those who become one with the link. It's so simple.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, we already have the thing about cars being hacked and how they were taking out particular political enemies. Doing that, that's been going on for a while, probably over 2 decades. But I think this image is quite important because this is really what we're talking about. And Optimus is the name of it. Now, last fall, Musk demonstrated a posse of Optimus bots at the We Robot event, Warner Brothers Studios. With white, gleaming metallic frames and LED lit faces, the robots mingled with the crowd, poured cocktails, posed for selfies, and danced on a lit up stage. Hey, nothing like getting down with a robot, right? And then the reality show Kim Kardashian featured the bot on her new socials, a series of videos, et cetera, et cetera. And there's one that does Hawaiian dance moves. I can't wait to see that. Yeah. The latest appearances showcased how far Tesla has come since 2021. And then they said, what's the biggest challenge of being a robot? Trying to learn how to be as human as you guys, Optimus responded with unsettling self-awareness. And that's something I try harder to do every day, it said. Optimus marks a breakthrough in humanoid robotics, stands 5'8", weighs 125 pounds, can carry 45 pounds. The robot's hands feature 11 degrees of freedom. Throughout 2024, Optimus has shown off an expanding repertoire of abilities ranging from sorting colored blocks to doing yoga poses. And in 2025, neural networks are constantly learning. And then, so they raise the possibility and are like, yikes, where is this leading in these articles? But they know the danger exists on such a huge level with it that if you don't have an ethical guardrail immediately in place for this, you're going to be, it's going to be, the robot revolution is coming indeed. But it's very interesting because Musk's own comments on this I found fascinating. Quote, he says it will be the biggest product ever of any kind. That's putting a lot on it. You don't want to bet against a guy with a proven track record of turning moonshots into moneymakers. Twitter, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So we can see that with the low level of the awareness of the tech people on a spiritual level and the lack of regard for the culture at large and the lack of ethics involved. And a lot of these people, I hate to say this, but on that level from Bezos to Zuckerberg to Musk, they have some kind of emotional mutation. It's hard to describe exactly what that is, but it seems like a lack of empathy for the rest of humanity that surfaces once in a while. And then whenever they're trying to parrot what a regular, real empathy would feel like between normal people, it always sounds very scripted. So that's been my experience. I was around, when I was doing the tech magazine, I was around a lot of these people. And the problem was the way that they looked at humanity was that they were going into a great place and humanity was down here, And I heard this over and over again. One of the really big time CEO guys expressed to me that he basically what he thought of people as ants. So, you know, this has been my experience dealing with them, and I don't, whenever I get around them or see them in public or, you know, review their videos and interviews and things, it does not look good. They're not on a regular level the way that ordinary people are. Yes.
Isn't that what Orson Welles said in The Third Man also?
In The Third Man.
Yes.
Yes.
Looking
Yeah,
down
yeah.
at all those people basically being insects.
Yeah, all those dots down there. If one of those dots stopped moving, what would I feel like?
Mhm.
And then Holly Martin, the hero of the story, says he used to believe in God, and Harry turns and says, "Oh, I still do." So yeah, they're able to convince themselves of these things. I mean, even we hear from a lot of the Nazi histories, when you look into it, that they had all these justifications going on, which I think are very fascinating. Like, we're doing this because we're, you know, developing the super breed, and humanity will thank us eventually for
There's
killing
only
half of them
one.
all.
I'm going to insert myself here.
Yeah.
I come back to this again and again and again because this is my hypothesis, and it gets reaffirmed, confirmed, and reaffirmed all the time.
Right.
Is that it is just one big game of King of the Mountain. That's what, if the
Oh,
Earth plane is
yes.
one thing, it is that.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it's children playing the game. And until we grow up, until we mature from that approach,
Yes.
and thinking that that's what the Earth plane is for, I don't know.
Wow. Well, it's interesting. There's a backwards thing in there. And yet, throughout culture, there have been these little breadcrumbs left for us, these seeds for higher things. We're going to get into those next. What did the mystery schools leave for this very special period where we're seemingly overwhelmed by the technology? And yet, according to the key mystery information, we've done it all before. We've faced it all before, and this is another chance to face the whole thing, to go from a horse and buggy to, you know, space rockets and spaceships in less than 100 years. Yeah, that's a dramatic switch. But what's it all about? We're going to get to it next. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show deep tonight in X Series 210. This is Atlantis Tuaoi, Ahriman Transhumanist Terror 2026. And we're going to be taking your questions in the second half tonight. Like I said, we'll go a couple hours with you. So in about a half hour, we'll start taking your questions. In the meantime, what do you got?
Karen Carpenter says, I'm suspicious that Elon used Doge to gain access to federal databases for his AI. Does DJ think this is a possibility?
Yeah, well, a number of people have said it, and it was extraordinary at the time. Also, you know, he had this incredible thing about Doge, right? Oh, we have to be efficient, and we have to save all this money here, there, and like all this places that it's squirreled away. And he gives all these interviews about how in 3 years money's not going to matter at all. Something, you know, he's talking to two different sets of people all the time, and he just panders. And this is a big problem with Musk. Whatever he's talking about, it doesn't make any sense, because you can't, on one hand, say we need all this government efficiency, and then say in 3 years money won't matter and jobs will be optional, and, you know, it'll be something that you do for fun or whatever. I don't trust any of the UBI stuff at all. None of it. Because when you cease to be productive in a society like this, what tends to happen with something that's not productive? They get rid of it. So you can't build in a society where people don't have a value or a function and just get paid to kind of hang out and watch Netflix. It's not going to happen, especially with Obama taking over there and doing the Betty and Barney Hill movie. Now, isn't that spooky? I've put that on the record. I'm still waiting for the actual movie, but apparently it's called White Mountain. All right. Something very important to start off with on the mystery side are some quotes that make a special sense in this period of time that come directly from Steiner. And then we're going to move to the Cayce information and then back to the transhumanist vision. All of that tonight in this one episode. Okay. This, and again, Rudolf Steiner, for those of you who don't know, and I know we have new people here all the time, anyone who's been watching the show knows Steiner as good as they know a relative, and an incredible biography. But Steiner's the Austrian mystic who came through Theosophy originally, wrote an incredible book about Goethe, and was doing his own branch of Theosophy there in Germany. And then after a while started to see things that he didn't agree with in Theosophy that the overemphasis on the Eastern mystery school technique, which already had been brought to bear and set up the Western mystery tradition. So this was the period for the Western mystery tradition. And he was like, you know, this is going in the wrong direction. And he broke off and did anthroposophy. As a result of that, the spiritual science that came out of it, of course, the incredible flowering of the teaching with eurythmy, which is the movement, you know, and there's so many things. The Dalcroze method, what is that? That's a movement method to get your body back in alignment. That all comes out of theosophy and anthroposophy as well. Of course, biodynamic farming, which we're still going to see the value of that here 100 years later. And we're seeing bigger and bigger people get involved with that. You know, famously, a couple months ago, I reported that Sting has a biodynamic wine, you know, whole vineyard dedicated to that. So it's getting in there. It's seeping in through different levels of culture. And of course, the Waldorf schools, which now, especially in America, dotted throughout. And there was an incredible flashpoint there during the whole kind of mandating vaccine, this and that, where, you know, the people who are into anthroposophy are very aware of a higher holistic science. They're at least aware of it. And so this shows the kind of clash and some of the ideas of Steiner coming to fruition here in the 21st century, but none more important than his concept of Ahriman. And I want to explain why. But we have to go back and looking at Steiner. He's born in 1861, and he lived until 1925. And during that time, he set up anthroposophy. And during the Second World War, he got really fed up with everything and said, you know, we've been developing all these secret mystery teachings and all the rest of it. I want to let it all out because, you know, World War I is a failure on the part of anthroposophy, the mystery schools, everything. We really need to get this information out. Then he made the famous prediction in 1921, well, if anthroposophy doesn't change the society now, there's going to be a door that opens in 100 years. That's the period here that we're in, and it's very interesting. The resurfacing of the work of Rudolf Steiner, particularly through what we're doing here on the X series and the Eighth Sphere and all the rest of it, the work of Gigi Young, this stuff, there've always been a dedicated band of Steiner people, but I will say that through this series and through the work of Gigi Young and the combination of she and I working on these ideas, it has come into a different place, and a lot more people now catch on and understand things like Ahriman, the Eighth Sphere, and the spiritual science, New Jupiter. These things are a lot more common in concept and conversation because we've done so many X-Series episodes on them and gone deep into that Great White Brotherhood mystery school aspect. So this is a change, and I've always felt that what Steiner was predicting is part of what we're bringing to bear, and so the time is right for so many of these ideas. Here is Steiner addressing this now. And a lot of this deals with the idea that the mystery schools made a decision at a certain point to bring out information because scientific materialism was taking over and strangling the, you know, any kind of spiritualist thought. And that happened in the mid-19th century. And it's very interesting because Steiner is suggesting here a little bit later, now after World War I, that the same thing needs to happen again. And here we come to a chapter that must not be withheld from the knowledge of modern man. If in the future humanity were to do nothing towards acquiring a new wisdom, then unconsciously the whole of culture would become Ahrimanic. And it would be easy for the influence issuing from Ahriman's incarnation to permeate all civilization on the earth. Precautions must therefore be taken in regard to the streams by which the Ahrimanic form of culture is furthered. This is the technology aspect. What would be the result if men were to follow the strong inclination they have today and let things drift on as they are without understanding and guiding into right channels, those streams which lead to an Ahrimanic culture? As soon as Ahriman incarnates at the destined time in the West, in this century, okay, in the 21st century. I'm mentioning that. And the whole of the culture will be impregnated with his forces. What else could come in his train? Through certain stupendous arts, he would bring to man all the clairvoyant knowledge, which until then they acquired only by dint of intense labor and effort. Men would live on as materialists. They could eat and drink as much as they may be left after the major war, and there would be no need for any spiritual efforts. The harmonic streams would continue their unimpeded course. When Ahriman incarnates in the West at the appointed time, he would establish a great occult school for the practice of magic arts with the greatest grandeur, and what otherwise can be acquired only by strenuous effort would be poured over mankind, the clairvoyant knowledge. Progress and education of mankind were not like a modern Philistine fearful of receiving wisdom. Okay, so this is very crucial for us to get a handle on. Ahriman is a force operating around humanity since, in the Steiner cosmology, the moon split off from the Earth. So in Steiner's work, the moon is very important and comes from the Earth. And there's a great deal of beings that are associated with it. But there was a certain point where it was breaking off that this Ahrimanic force came into and became a part of, artificially, the evolution of humanity to exploit it, and developed a different realm of development that he refers to as the eighth sphere. So that eighth sphere is like a virtual reality, place of imagination, place of projection. It's not real. And by sucking humanity into that and cutting them off directly from their spiritual center, you're dealing with a really sort of major discrepancy in the normal spiritual evolutionary track. So before I read the next quote, I want us to wrap our minds around the idea of Steiner spent basically 4 decades of his life trying to bring this harmonic idea to the fore with great descriptions, and so prophetic that if you're looking at them and you're reading them and taking a look at them, I remember, being very young and reading them and thinking, this stuff seems very modern. But it started to become like reading the headlines of everything that's been going on in terms of the developments, as if Steiner could see it then and was giving us the tools to prepare. And knowing that he was plugged in to this Rosicrucian background, that the mystery school behind him were the Rosicrucians, this gives us a much better idea of what's going on with Steiner fronting a public mystery school of anthroposophy on top of that background of theosophy. And then in the background there, as we know with Steiner, there are these Rosicrucian masters. So they are feeding this out to the public and saying, you know what, the public can't be left to fend for itself because in 100 years, we're not going to recognize humanity. So therefore, they start to leak some of this out. And we've had, there have been some interesting side effects from having some of that out there. And you do get, a lot of fluff around the cosmic side of things. There's no question about it. However, I will say this, when we look at the work that's been brought forward by the mystery schools, they have provided a foundation for how to handle the 21st century and its challenges. And the idea is not to run away from the technology and, live on a desert island and hope for the best while these other guys blow themselves up, which doesn't sound like a bad plan. But really to face up against it, to face the harmonic track and to gain on the evolutionary side from that face-off, and to use, to have that be the basis of an enlargement of our own spiritual consciousness. That is a crucial aspect. And as I turn back to Steiner now, I want us to keep in mind that when he talks about Ahriman, it's not a doomsaying. It is more of a warning that this is what's coming in. And if you face it, if you go into it, if you plug into it, if you say, oh yeah, Ahriman's going to give me clairvoyance or telepathy, like the Musk implant, then you're going to be sucked into that evolution, which has nothing to do with the actual spiritual evolutionary track of humanity at all, and is really a gigantic interference. But this is the period where they can do it. And if they can fall upon humanity unawares, then that's where the trouble starts. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist show. This is X Series 210, going deep tonight into the hall behind the hall and the mask behind the mask to get you some of the truth around what's happening with the transhumanists and the terror that they have planned in their technology through the work of the mystery school warnings of Rudolf Steiner and, of course, the work of Gurdjieff as well, but Edgar Cayce and Helena Blavatsky. We're going to be taking your questions tonight here shortly. And Miss Olivia's already taking those. You can ask them anytime during the show and she'll put them together. I'm going to throw it over to you.
Deep State You're Fired says, isn't the Ahrimanic force part of the test facing humanity who, on a large scale, are going through a process/initiation of realizing we are not only physical beings, but spiritual?
Yeah, it is. It's an intense challenge, but also forces like what he's discussing, they get opportunities in different times of periods to really make headway for controlling humanity. And if you go deep into the cosmology that fuels the Steiner work, what you're looking at is that the 19th century set all of this up and that this was the real dive into materialism. And so what we're trying to do is rewrite and sort of unwrap and unravel some of the things that were put together there in the 19th century that we're seeing unfold now. And so that becomes part of the modern control grid and everything else that we've been facing. The world wars and all that have been a symptom of this. And as we go into these, rumors of wars and the wars that are kicking around, whether it's Ukraine or the one that might happen in Venezuela and all these other things, it's a war era. It has to be by the nature of it. And that's what we're getting with the forces in charge, because they aren't going for a brighter day with humanity. They're looking for consolidation and control, but on their terms. And whether you're Russia, the forces in China, which have the incredible technological overload, and very often China escapes any of the real scrutiny. Of course, we have tremendous Chinese American community here, and they despise that regime that's running China as much as any non-Chinese American would. So I have to say, it's interesting to me, and I think that still shows the incredible reach of the money and the tech coming out of China in relation to this. But China is, there's a danger here, which is, it also comes up in the Cayce and the Steiner work, which is if America fails, then civilization will move to China and China will be the next point. And considering the kind of martial philosophy over there and throwing you in jail over social media posts and things of that nature, like they're doing in the UK now too. These are not, the ethical, moral highlights, city on a shining hill aspects that we want running the world. So hopefully America doesn't fail. Let's see how that could work. What else you got?
Karen Carpenter says, can DJ show the visual of the eighth sphere, the location? I found it helpful when I was new to the topic. Did you print it out tonight?
No, it's a very simple drawing, and maybe I'll put it up on X Twitter tonight a little bit later. But what it basically does is it operates as something that is linked both inside of the Earth, so it's between the Earth and the Moon, and it overshadows the Earth. And when you talk about spheres, basically it's understood when you get into mystery work that you are looking at a sphere from a clairvoyant point of view. So a clairvoyant can see very obviously what's being built up. We won't see the eighth sphere on a physical. You can't measure it with a telescope or radar or anything like that. But its presence, is certainly felt. So this is the clash that's going on. But the eighth sphere getting stronger and stronger with the advent of the incredible imaginations of, artificial intelligence and draining people's focus away. It's why I spend so much time trying to keep people in this work focused on things that can help them and that can bring them up, not false, UFO threats and things of that nature. The UFO file is real. That's the thing to focus on, what's in there. Forget about the threat thing. You don't need to know about the gender of the French president's wife. It doesn't do anything for anybody. It's a useless waste of time. But what you can do is you can take that energy and channel it into something useful. And once we interact with the information around the mystery knowledge, it's on such a different level. And if we could get that mass of people paying more attention to their actual destiny in this sense, you'd have a totally different quality of interaction. And I think one of the worst things in what's called the independent media now, and I've been around the independent media for a long time, was dedicated to building something very important. But the independent media is exactly like the mainstream media now, and I mean exactly. There is no difference. It is paid, it is bought, and it has nothing to do with anything that we do on this program. So I have no interest in it. I will say that it's going to come out more and more with some of the things that I've done research on in the background, where that money's coming from and who's being pushed and promoted in relation to that. And a lot of it, a lot of the really weird things that we're seeing are coming from a variety of places, but Peter Thiel is going to come in the center of a lot of this in terms of the media manipulation, with his weird desire to mix the Christians' belief in an afterlife and things with his ET Messiah and things. So he's going to try to mix this Antichrist Messiah thing. I'm going to show you the absurdity of that. I have an interesting quote about it. Yeah, what do you got?
I just wanted to find this about that. I've lost it.
Well, I'll read this while you look for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this came as quite an interesting shock because although, I know this has been going on and I've been tracking it, and I've even talked to some of the people involved and how they've been approached and things, but this was a particular shock. So this was Joe Rogan on a program, and the host is the guy who's Peter Thiel's investor, who's doing all these documentaries and stuff. He's a UFO guy now. All right. Joe Rogan says Jesus could come back as a robot.
This is what I was looking for. Mm-hmm.
The A in AI, this is Newsweek, okay. The A in AI could stand for Almighty. According to a theory put forward by Joe Rogan about what form Jesus Christ could take if he were to return, interviewed on American Alchemy podcast, Rogan gave his views on aliens, the future, and artificial intelligence. Rogan suggested Jesus could come back thanks to technology, telling the host, Jesus was born out of a virgin mother. What's more virgin than a computer? Jeez. This is pure Peter Thiel, trial balloon, and, messing with the narrative, trying to see if the Christian community would buy into that. And if for any reason in the world that anyone would buy into this ludicrousness. Why it matters. Rogan is a renowned podcast host, and he gave a wide-ranging interview to Michaels about his thoughts on science, technology, and the future. Now, he's talking to a Thiel guy and inserting Thiel principles. This is weird. Now I wonder about what they did with Rogan to position him in this way, because this is, I'm telling you, this is exactly what the transhumanist playbook is all about. And they need to swing kind of the Christian vote into this. So they need to find a way, as Thiel is trying to do around the ET thing, to be like, ETs are mixed with spirituality, or ETs are demons and you need to fight against them. Don't believe the hype and don't inhale on that one. Okay. A little more. His views on artificial intelligence and how it relates to the divine have gone viral, sparking a lively online discussion. We're sparking a lively online discussion right now. Rogan spoke to Michaels in the podcast, which was released this week, titled Joe Rogan, The Truth About Alien. The show notes the interviewed covered alien contact and UFO secrecy. Yeah, that's the other thing. So Michaels, who does his show, is a famous plagiarist of this program over and over again. We've talked about this. And so that's another thing, which is, Thiel's guy goes out there, imitates the X series, and now he has Rogan on there talking about this. That is all very interesting to me. Now, somebody sent me a thing saying that he suggested that, oh yeah, he actually cited dark journalists. So I've already had ups and downs with him. It's not about him. I'm not interested in him. I'm interested in what Peter Thiel is doing in the space. So let's keep that where it is. And I think that Thiel is putting all of these things on the table. And it's very interesting because people who went to that, secret meeting of Thiel where he's like, nobody can take any notes. It's my Antichrist special. These were all the people that were there. So, it feels to me like they get together like the Bilderberg group and then come out with these points. Now, what I've said before, I want to say this about Thiel when I've studied him, and there's a lot of stuff, Palantir and other things that are pretty dark. It's not like saying he's a Soros character who's manipulating on that level. This is a different thing. They're going for narratives. And I think that these people, have a lot of skeletons in their closet, and this is part of the problem. So we don't always know who we're dealing with here.
Are you getting into the boyfriend?
Oh, yeah, I do have that story here. Well, I'll mention that Peter Thiel's reported romantic partner was found dead in Miami. Police are investigating the possible suicide. Now, the guy was a model and an actor. And I have to say, the police themselves were suspicious of it. And the case kicked around. But I will say, for the record, they didn't find anything involving that implicated Thiel. But, quote, Jeff Thomas, a 35-year-old actor and model, was found dead in Miami in a possible suicide. He was reportedly in a relationship with Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire. Police view the case as a possible suicide and plan to interview Thiel. That was back in April. And I haven't heard anything on the case since then. So obviously they buried it. And maybe they couldn't go any further with it. The Intercept said Thomas was in a relationship with Thiel, the tech billionaire who spent millions to support right-wing politicians. Miami police declined to confirm details. It's still an open, active investigation. It was then. Let's see. The Intercept reported that Thomas and Thiel had been seen at each other's homes, including at raucous parties. The story also is that Thomas claimed that he tried to convince Thiel not to support anti-gay politicians like Blake Masters, who he spent millions trying to get elected. What I want to say is that Thiel's married. So this is why the story is so strange. And there's another mysterious death that comes up tonight, which I'm going to point out that is associated with Sam Altman. So, I think these things are worth looking into. And I don't prejudge the results of any of it, but I think it's strange. And especially when you get somebody who's that close, an actual partner, there's a lot there. But what gets me really is that they're trying these things out. And I mentioned this earlier with what they were doing with the Antichrist and, aliens or demons thing. They have J.D. Vance up there, who in many ways is a Thiel puppet. I'm not going to lie, and I don't support Thiel for president, through the figure of J.D. Vance in 2028. Everything I've seen from Vance in the first year of his vice presidency shows that he's not ready to be president. And he was supposed to, I'm just going to make this a little aside on Vance because I always give the free advice to the Trump administration. He was supposed to be the reasonable counterpart to Trump, who many of Trump's press conferences now, he gets up there and it seems like he just calls all the reporters names. That's not very useful. You might as well not have the press conference. And the reporters themselves, we know the mainstream media and all their hijinks and all the rest of it. That's fine. But, it's not a good look for people who are interested in Trump and his vision, what he wants to do, to have him sitting there and saying, you're a very stupid person, So whatever, that's what Trump is, right? And we know it, but I don't think it helps in terms of what he's trying to do or bringing around the Congress in 2026. We'll see how that election plays out. But Vance was supposed to be kind of the logical counterpart, and instead they're acting like he's a mini-me, and he's been coming out and being like, he's using kind of like trashy language and stuff, and for me, it's not. It's a put on. It's trying to make him look like he's tough like Trump, but it's not who he is. So it looks bad. Actually, on them, it looks worse than when the actual guy does it. So I think it sets up a very unusual thing. But I think that Vance now is going to have to explain his Teal association a lot better if he wants to go further, because we're looking at Teal as a major piece behind this transhumanist approach. So that has to be dealt with. Yes.
I'm sorry. No, SB Harkins says, I think that eyeliner was tattooed. He's supposed to have two lines of eyelashes. It's like that's why his eyes.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not, but any woman would be envious of that.
Well, if that was somebody out there just, doing good things politically with their money, I wouldn't care about it at all. But is the messing with the UFO threat, dancing that thing, trying to turn aliens into demons, and conning Christians with the Antichrist thing with aliens, and then, tossing Joe Rogan out on this Teal investor show masquerading as a documentary show. And then, them saying, well, Jesus is just the Immaculate Conception as a computer. I mean, it's an incredible misstep. And it's one of the most uncool things that I've seen in the space in a long time from someone on that level. So it was really, really surprising on a lot of levels. All right. Mysterious heartbeat pulsating from interstellar object 3i Atlas as it nears Earth. They're not done with 3i Atlas. Are you ready?
Okay.
The mysterious interstellar object 3i Atlas has developed a strange heartbeat that's making it glow more brightly as it nears Earth in just 2 weeks. Now, look, 3i Atlas was always interesting coming in from another system. But what they did, and I think I demonstrated this 2 weeks ago, which is this all goes back to the Arecibo destruction of that telescope that took place in Puerto Rico in 2020. I think that as I found out in my investigation, was aimed directly at where 3i Atlas came from. So they needed to get that out of there so that these astronomers and other people couldn't study that data. And they wanted to time it in Avi Loeb's big promotion with the 3i Atlas piece with Age of Disclosure, which is why they sat on Age of Disclosure for 3 years. There's no reason to do that. And in fact, it's very flat as a result of that. So they thought, oh, we'll put all this together. We'll have the big alien hype and, then we'll push it over the top. And immediately when that movie came out, you had all this people going around, Schellenberger and other people. And I have a few things to say about Schellenberger, but going around and saying this whole bit about how Trump is about to disclose, Rubio's on board, all this stuff. It's all old clips of Rubio from 2022 in Age of Disclosure. And he, of course, as I started the program out, came on Fox News and said, no, that's not what I said at all. So remember, the UFO file is real. The hype that they're doing for the threat piece isn't. That's why when you see Loeb or Mellon or all those people, that's when you know that's the con job version, not the real version. There's a real UFO file. We need to walk and chew gum on that when we deal with it. And I hear from this all the time, people saying, well, DJ, don't you want disclosure? Look, I don't want CIA disclosure. It's very simple. I know what the real thing is. I've been after the real thing for a number of years. I've talked with the top people dealing with the real thing all the way back to John Mack in 2005. Okay. So I understand that people have gone after the genuine thing. The threat thing doesn't have anything to do with the actual UFO file, and they won't give it to you because if you know anything about the CIA, that's not what they do. They don't tell the truth and give the public anything. They lie to the public and get into trouble about it, and then nobody can really do anything about it because of the charter that they're under. So, in my opinion, they're an extra constitutional force and have been since they were created by 1947. Harry Truman, who invented them, said it was a mistake. So, and he said that right after the Kennedy assassination. We're very clear about that. President Eisenhower realized they were a mistake. That's when the battles took place, and somehow they survived, even though basically everyone in government knows that they assassinated President Kennedy and that they covered it up. So that's the state of the state, as it were. And I have to say, when you say CIA, we have to understand what we're talking about. You're talking about NGA, DIA, and NRO. They're all trained by the Central Intelligence. It's honeycombed with CIA people. So you can't mention any of these various intelligence institutions without talking about the CIA. That's the power base. That's where it comes from. And it is good, President Trump appointed somebody good to be the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, and also Ratcliffe at CIA. That's great. But I think, as I've mentioned, they have a Stansfield-Turner problem, which is Jimmy Carter, when he came in the 70s, was like, I'm going to clean up that CIA. And he threw his friend Stansfield-Turner over there, who he met in military school, and was like, clean up the CIA. And they basically just didn't listen to any of his orders. They waited him out, and then they got Carter out, the Iran hostage thing, and they got somebody favorable in George Bush and Ronald Reagan's VP. So then they just were back. And they offshored it, in fact. And in the work of Professor Scott, he goes deep into something called the Safari Club. And the Safari Club's important because what they did was they offshored the CIA and waited. But it includes all the same major people, like Richard Helms and the Theodore Shackley and others. So as soon as Reagan got in, all those people were back, and they were, blowing up Central America, right? So the CIA, they've never been really called out properly, and they get investigated. It's true, they get wrist slaps and things of that nature. But unfortunately, they're still operating outside of any kind of normal legal framework. And I think that the entire piece around the Central Intelligence Agency, like President Kennedy said, needs to be re-examined and restructured. And, at a certain point, he's like, I'm just going to, get rid of the CIA, blast them into 1,000 pieces. He realized that what was going on in relation to the CIA and, on the world stage is that they had taken over. And if you read some of his aides talking about him and his reaction when he got into the White House, even though he was so knowledgeable and his dad had set him up so well with information and he knew so many of the intel ins and outs, he could not believe the power that they had assumed over the presidency, doing their own thing, not checking in with the president, running their own policies, having their own Air Force, for heaven's sake. So it's, this is the major thing. And when you get deep state researchers, as I've pointed out on a number of occasions, the deep state researchers who've studied the JFK, RFK, MLK assassinations and all the various things, Iran-Contra, 9/11 and stuff like that, they understand the intelligence agencies and how they roll much better than the CIA, than the UFO people do. The UFO people are like, hey, the CIA are going to give us the truth. So that's why the field got winnowed down to people who didn't have any backbone, and why the CIA rolled this thing out. But I think that their op is still lacking, that their Sky event that they still need more infrastructure to pull that off. And that's why I think they're so dangerous. Another weird side thing I just want to mention here, a New Jersey-bound JetBlue plane that plunged thousands of feet, likely hit by cosmic rays from another galaxy.
This.
Yes, this is interesting because, this is the Death Star on steroids right here. A JetBlue flight from Cancun to Newark experienced a sudden severe altitude drop, injuring 15 passengers. While initially attributed to solar radiation, a space expert now suggests cosmic rays from a distant supernova. Okay. Something odd about this. And I also wondered, I wonder very much about Starlink and the integration of SpaceX with the secret space program. And if some of the things that they do don't cause these magnetic anomalies, that then they're like, oh, hey, it's a supernova over in some other system. I think eyes to the skies is kind of a good motto for that.
You know where my mind went immediately with that
Yes.
is, that's coming from another galaxy.
Yeah.
And
oh, yeah.
The whole alien story that the reason why they're here is because we detonated a nuke.
Yes.
And
yes.
that has implications for possibly other solar systems, other galaxies.
Right.
So I don't
yeah.
go there.
I think it's very interesting. Yeah. Well, there's no question that the suggestion of the UFO aspect and the UFO file mystery in relation to the nuclear aspect is absolutely like a lock. It's just not clear what that is, except that we may be bordering on whatever it is their activity is there. As a segue into the Cayce part of this, This is very important for us to look in the Atlantean mirror here, as Steiner was suggesting. And then I have a very interesting thing about Steiner in the 21st century and what he's predicting about these spider beings and how that so sounds like what they sent out as these crawlers for artificial intelligence. That's going to be the kind of denouement of this episode. So it's coming. Hang in there. Everyone, by the way, you're watching the Dark Journalist X series. It's X series episode 210. And this is Atlantis, the Tuaoi Atlantean Ahriman Transhumanist Terror 2026. I want to remind you, while I have your attention, to go to darkjournalist.com and sign up for our newsletter. It's a free newsletter, but it keeps us in touch with each other through the really intense static. And you have to say, just absolute censorship that this channel and my work goes through in general. And, you know, at times they ease off and at times they ramp it up. They've been ramping it up lately, really hardcore. There's a reason for that. But the best way to get around it is go to darkjournalist.com, sign up, and it takes literally 30 seconds of your time. And in the meantime, what we'll do is send you every week in your inbox all of the exciting X series episodes that we have coming up for you. Incredible interviews. We have fabulous interviews coming up for you for the end of the year. And we just got through an incredible November of interviews. And DocuSeries, Pyramid X, JFK and the UFO File, new episodes coming out with that, dramatic documentary work that we've been putting forward. It's all there in the newsletter. So stand up and be counted. Go to darkjournalist.com, sign up for the newsletter. It's free. Okay. That's Bimini from Satellite. Edgar Cayce said very, very interesting things. And believe it or not, there's some very, very unusual things if you go into the record about his readings regarding Bimini and who paid attention to them and who ultimately ended up stealing them. But how I'm going to roll into this is I'm going to start with a story about Bimini's new $250 million Rockwell Island luxury home development breaks ground. Rockwell. Isn't that an interesting little name? Well, Rockwell North American was the leading aerospace company that actually took us to the moon with the Apollo missions. And its CEO was known as pushing the boundaries of aerospace and seemed to always have these secret projects going on. Oddly enough, one of the things I came across in the record regarding Cayce is that this person who headed up Rockwell North America was, in fact, one of the main members of the Edgar Cayce Foundation, the ARE, and was obviously investing and studying and trying to find the ruins of Atlantis off Bimini. And I found this character quite fascinating. What I got from the various pieces there was that as an aerospace company, they were doing things that other companies weren't, and they were getting tremendous results and became the key aerospace company along with some of the major ones like Lockheed. But their role in the Apollo missions got me very curious, especially with this whole piece around the hot zone and the work that we've dedicated there about all of the intrigue around the advanced technology of something called the Tuaoi stone, Tuaoi. We've done hot zone episodes on, X series episodes on the Tuaoi stone. It's there in the series. But what I will say about what Cayce was saying is that that was the power grid that fueled and powered the Atlantean civilization, and that the echoes back there of advanced technology all have to do with this development of the Tuaoi stone, which he described as a very, very unusual crystal power grid that ran their entire civilization. Now, let's read a little bit of that and then get a little bit about how Rockwell is involved. All right, so this is a crucial reading, and it's the one after it that gets stolen. But this is the setup, and what happened was a number of businessmen came to Cayce and they said, we want to basically, do some mining over here in the Bahamas. What do you recommend? And they did one reading with him, and then they said, you know what, come down to Florida. We want you down here, Edgar. We're going to do some other readings with you. Okay. Edgar goes down to Florida and Miami. He's giving them readings in this hotel room, and some amazing things come out. So he's getting these questions. You'll have before you the material and information given through this channel of Edgar Cayce on the lost continent of Atlantis. You'll answer the questions I asked regarding this. And Cayce says, yes, we find the information as written here. And following out that is just given previously, with the changes coming in the experience back then of Amelius and the Amelius group. These are the ones who are using the technology back there in a positive fashion. Amelius and AI is the actual name. Those are the original Adam and Eve. The knowledge of their position, or that as is known in the material world today as the physical bodily charms, the understanding of sex, male-female sex relationships, came into experience. With these came a natural fear of that as had been forbidden, that they themselves to be a part of, that took of the earthly desires and the manners about them, in that as had been their heritage. Were this turned to that period when this desire then becomes consecrated and that accomplished again in the virgin body of the mother of the Son of Man, we see this is the crystallized into that even that all of flesh with the proper concept, proper desire, and all its purity, consecrated to living forces as manifest in the ability of the body so brought into being as to make a way of escape for humanity. This is interesting on a lot of levels, especially given that Joe Rogan quote about the Virgin Mary and computer and Christ and all that. Here's Cayce saying these spirits are coming down into matter, and they are, through Amelius, being led in a pathway instead of just projecting themselves into materiality. They're being given a pattern, and that this turns into a doorway for this Tuaoi stone, the technology of Atlantis, and that over the course of time, this development of advanced technology through the Amelius group gets copied by this other group, the Belial group, and that they use it for all the types of things, the warlike things that we see going on now. But he's getting right into the core of it. And so then they say, in relation to the history of Atlantis as presented, what period did the flood as recorded in the Bible of Noah take part? When did this occur? And he said it was the second eruption. So 22,006 years before Christ, as time is counted now, day and night years, not light years as the Akashic record and the esoteric records counted by astrology and astronomy. These are the Akashic records, see? Now, activity of any nature, as of the voice, as of light, made or produced in the natural forces of those of motion which pass on or upon the record of that as time, they may be illustrated in the atomic vibration as set in motion for those that are called radio in its activity. It passes even faster than time itself. Hence, light forces pass much faster, but the records are upon the esoteric, etheric, and Akashic forces. Now, what he's giving us there is very interesting, because Cayce is saying, look, if you attune yourself the same way that you get radio waves, the same way you do these other things, you can read the Akashic record, which is what he's doing while he's in this trance state. When Steiner is going back, he uses what? What does he call it? It's the same thing, the Akashic Chronicle, the Akashic records. So what they're suggesting is you get to a stage when you are doing mystery work where you can go back and look at that past and deduce what humanity was going through and what was happening. And so that part on its own is very interesting. Now, and he talks a little bit about the what they were doing there in relation to the Tuaoi stone. And I just want to bring this in because I think it's crucial with what we're talking about now. The sun, as the father of light on the earth, the elements have attraction and detraction. This, as we see throughout all of the kingdoms, as may be termed, whether we speak of heavenly hosts or of the stars or the planets, the various forces within any and all of same. And so he goes on, and he's starting to say that they are using, back in this period, the sun and stars to motivate this Tuaoi stone. And they say, what were the principal islands called at the time of the final destruction of Atlantis? And Cayce answers, Poseidia, Arian, and Og. Poseidia was the island that is where Bimini, Cuba, and everything in the hot zone was. So when that goes down, there's still that piece, Bimini, left above. But what Cayce is saying is that they put a hall of records in Bimini, and it's right there off the coast of Bimini. And that we're seeing now is the Bimini Road, which was discovered in 1968. Now that's 50 some odd years ago. That is part of the temple that Cayce predicted was coming up right out of the slime of ages off the coast of Bimini. And this is what gets us so interesting to me, that Rockwell and the group Rockwell took an interest in Cayce's work and became basically, the chief person. But I've always wondered if Rockwell wasn't associated with this business group that takes Cayce down to Bimini, steals the last reading, and then disappears. And there's a weird addendum on that. But a little more about it. Describe the ships that were used during the periods of mechanical developments. And he says, the combination of what is now a lost art, tempered brass. And then he goes on to talk about the impelling forces and how the ships that they had could go through anything and that they could go anywhere in the universe. This is Cayce's version of what the Atlanteans could do with their advanced technology. And at a certain point, he says, not only, when they ask how high could these things fly, the Atlantean ships, the airships, and he would say, well, they could go anywhere, and they also would not just fly over mountains and things, they would fly through them. So I've put that dead center in the research around Cayce because he's talking about transmutation there, the types of abilities that the Atlanteans had. But here's what he has to say about the Tuaoi stone. So these were not only the rays from the sun that were set in the facets of the stones as crystallized from the heat within the elements of the earth itself, but were a combination of these. For if it was these gases, these influences that were used for what we call today the conveniences for light, heat, motivative forces, radial activity, electrical combinations, the motivative forces of steam, gas, and the like for conveniences. This entity, Dew, was among the first who attempted to make influences in the experience with the machines as it were producing what we would call today food, clothing. And the machines were used for the sources of correlating or centralizing, crystallizing the activity of the very forms. The use of the influences, this is the technology, by the sons of Belial, brought from the first of the upheavals of the turning of the etheric rays influence from the sun. This was used by the sons of the Law of One, that's the Emilius group, into the facet for the activities of same, produced what we would call volcanic upheaval and the separating of the land into several islands. Now, Poseidia, the place of settlement, and that particular entity, Dew, at the time became one of those islands. Hence, the confusion at times is seen by those who would interpret such records. Sometimes you hear about Poseidia, sometimes you hear about Atlantis. Poseidia was the main headquarters of the Emilius group, who were the positive group with the technology, and Arian and Og were dominated by the sons of Belial. The Arian and Og parts of that, stretched out basically the Mediterranean on one side, the Gulf of Mexico on the other. So we get a hint there of what it is. Now here's Cayce talking about the name. And they said, well, how would you describe this? And he said, well, you can actually draw it. In the center, upon a board of paper, we would begin with the stone in the light of the activities in the temple of the Atlantean Poseidian era. This might be termed the Tuaoi stone, Tuaoi. We've done a lot about the etymology of the word, and it's very strange, but basically what it means is people. And so when you say Tuaoi stone, it's people of the stone or people of the crystal. And that would be a 6-facet stone of the height as to proportion with the rest of the chart may be indicated. The stone of the Tuaoi would be opalescent, while the light would be indicated at the top with the rays of the white light. As to what form or shape it was in the form of a six-sided figure in which the light appeared as the means of communications between infinity and the finite. This is what the Amelius group used it for. They were interacting with the saintly realm, and they were training their priestesses and things to interact with the stone to receive these messages. And that got turned around and imitated later into actually creating kind of like a nuclear laser ray by the other group. So what he says, later this came to mean that from which energies radiated, the center from which there were radial activities guiding the various forms of transition of travel in those periods of the Atlanteans. It was set as a crystal, though in quite a different form that used there. And through these, in that time, airplanes, means of travel, they would travel in the air, on the water, or under the water just the same. Yet the force from which these were directed was in the central power station, the Tuaoi Stone Station, which was as the beam upon which it acted in the beginning. It was the source from which there was spiritual and mental contact. See, the technology goes beyond just being used as an energy source. There's some kind of spiritual, mental interaction. And finally, understand these are laws. If there would be the understanding of comprehension of these, or as has been given the basis, the beginning of law carries all the way through, and that which comes or begins first is conceived in spirit, grows in the mental, manifests in the material, as was the central force in the Atlantean experience. First, it was the means and source of manner by which the powers that be made for the centralization of making known this kind of spiritual interface between the children of God and the children of men and the directing forces of power. Humanity eventually turned this into the channel of destructive sources and is moving towards that in the present. This is the crucial piece that Cayce is giving us. Now, what happens is Steiner goes one step further and says, what's going to happen is the people who are running the secret societies, the left path of the mystery schools, are going to know that all the Atlanteans are coming back. And what they're going to do is they're going to study their unconscious memories of the period of being in those experiences of the technology of Atlantis.
Repeat that one more time.
Well, this is Steiner going back and telling us that these secret societies in the future, which is the period we're in, will be studying the people coming back, going through that reincarnation.
Are they going to be doing hypnotic regression work? Are they going to be doing work with
exactly
psychedelics, trying to tap into Atlantean lifetimes so they can recapture
exactly
that technology?
Yeah, they're going to be they're going to be getting their memories.
Well, that's brilliant. I have to say that.
Yeah,
that's
it is.
So,
and one of the things that he turned up on this, really focusing on, was saying, look, what they're going to be looking at particularly is age extension, because the Atlanteans lived much, much longer and the technology that existed for them. So they're going to be getting that, mining that from the unconscious of the people who went through those lifetimes. Now, right in the heart of the Steiner work, right in the heart of the Cayce work, is the reincarnation aspect. So it's unavoidable there. Now, some people believe in reincarnation, some people don't. What they're giving us is the belief, the understanding that people who are in Atlantis retain in their superconscious, subconscious, that ability of those past lives that can be tapped into, and that scientific groups, what Steiner's looking out into the future, that's what those people are going to be mining. So,
well, even remote viewing.
Yes.
Which anybody can learn.
Yeah, anyone can learn. That's a good point. What I would also say, and maybe this is kind of, crucial to understand, which is there are so many psychic programs alive in the government that we know nothing about. Remote viewing only came about actually because Russell Targ was looking to get the records declassified. The NRO, I like to point this out, National Reconnaissance Office, which is, the major intelligence group that studies space and everything going on in space and aerospace, they, all the satellites and everything else, they were put on board during the Kennedy administration, 1961. The public didn't know about them till the early 90s. So what groups now, say the secret space program, these other things that are active that we can't wait 30 years to find out if they're active? Those things dealing with the UFO file, this aspect around a Golden Dome, UFO defense grid, you see these things are, the plans and things are there. And so the government doing this stuff and having those groups, we might not hear anything about it. We might not know, oh, hey, you can point to this agency and say, they're the ones that are studying people's unconscious minds for the Atlantean technology, as Steiner predicted. But there's probably a group doing exactly that in the government. So I think, you just assume that they're doing it because they can keep these things very, very well hidden. Okay, something very strange to round out the entire Cayce program around Bimini. Here it goes. Now, the group that stole off with the final reading, the request for the reading and what it was going to include still survives in the ARE's record books. And this is the questions that they were set up to ask. Give the location of the Temple of the Poseidons and how far below the surface must excavation be made to locate it? What would be found in the ruins of the temple? This is the reading that Cayce gave them that we never got to see. On which island will the gold vein or deposit be found? And if on South Bimini, how many feet from the house now located west coast of the same name and what direction? Also in the stolen reading. Here's another question. Give the full name and business address of member of the other side of the Dodge House mentioned in your reading, March 2nd, 1927. This is interesting because one of the things that Cayce mentioned about Dodge is that they used to rule in Atlantis, that group, that family, and that this is part of their heritage, and that they were kind of coming back and dominating things now, and that they were very active, the Dodge family in the Atlantean parts. Here's this group, this business group. They want to know about the Dodge House. Next, plans and directions have been given for the development of Bimini Islands. Now give us what information and what should be said presenting the project, and what method should this be obtained? What is meant in the reading by the words keep in store? This is what's missing. Now, here's the story. Those people take off with the other reading. There's no copy. They take off with the copy. So the Cayce people don't have it anymore. Now, Cayce gets invited 3 years later to New York City to give a series of psychic lectures and things. And he goes up there, and he's always been curious about these guys disappearing and all the rest of it. He doesn't know what to make of it, but he lets it lay and just, moves on with his life. It's like, well, I guess they took the reading for some reason. I never heard from them again. So he's standing there giving this lecture, and he sees the three guys from the mysterious business group that disappeared. And they're right in the audience, sitting there, listening to him intently. And he's thinking to himself, oh, this is great. When I'm done with this, I'm going to talk to these guys, see what they did with the Bimini reading and all the rest of it. Finishes his lecture 20 minutes later. He comes off the stage. They're gone. They were there to listen to what he had to say, or to mention, wonder if he's going to mention this weird Bimini reading that got stolen. They're there, and then they disappear. Now, for me, the development and the secret support from the Rockwell Aerospace Group is definitely connected to what Cayce was saying about the secret ruins in the hot zone off Bimini. So this is where these things start to crisscross, because Rockwell North American is the same aerospace company that sent us to the moon. I have so much more to get into, but I've run over on time, so I'm going to throw it all over to you, Miss Olivia.
Okay. So Sarah Hansen wants to know, could the past Atlanteans be tapped into via Neuralink?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because Neuralink, a number of things that it can do. See, we still don't understand the subconscious. I'll tell you another thing. When they say, oh, we're putting all this into, the development of people having the ability to walk again and things of this nature. And, how could you be against that and things like that? Of course, you wouldn't be against any kind of medical benefits that could come from this. But here's another thing, in the work around osteopathy and everything else, in the work of Edgar Cayce, the holistic work, there are all kinds of solutions. As a matter of fact, at a certain point, Cayce said that 80% of the people who were in mental institutions in his era, in the 1930s, would all come out of them if they had had the osteopathic work from the subluxations in their spine that were causing the pressures, giving them the wrong mental impulses and things. Think about that. Where's the investment for that? No, everything is about getting this chip in you, because if you just get fixed and you're off and on your way, they don't keep you as part of their matrix system. But if I can slip a chip into you, I can do anything. Now, let's move the medical question aside, because there will always be someone to justify that. And if they're happy doing that, then that's their own right. Here's the other piece, which is what I brought up initially about Musk, is he said, well, actually, the larger goal of Neuralink is to have people insert it and be able to work with the silicone part so we can really interact with computers and all the rest. So the idea is they remove your skull cap, they put the chip in, they put the skull cap back on, and you're walking around with this chip in your brain. The number of things that they can do with that type of technology, forget it. We still don't understand our own superconscious. We don't understand our own subconscious. And that whole mystery school tradition about the silver cord and everything else, that needs to be the factor in how we think of these things, because we don't understand it. We don't understand dreams from a mystical level. How are people operating in a psychic zone with dreams and precognition and all of it? We don't understand any of that. Those are the things that would need to be studied long, long before any kind of corporation be sticking a chip in your brain. I think that is the line in the sand, in fact, which is, any kind of mystery training or any kind of religious teaching will teach you the body's the temple. So, once they're inside the body operating, they're inside the temple. That should not be allowed. That's the line in the sand for all the technology. There's a cutoff point, but they don't recognize any cutoff point because they're all about centralization and control. This is the transhumanist technology terror that we're talking about. And it's real, and they have plans to do it. And so the public needs to really have a position on this. And the position has to be that those people have to operate under some kind of ethical guardrail. And that it's not just like, hey, here's a bunch of Optimus robots to take over all your jobs. And guess what? Now you have all these people signing up for telepathy, and we'll just keep you in this digital control grid. That's not the future that we want. And, whatever they're doing with the propaganda around this, that it's going to improve your life, you're going to be able to live perennially, getting lattes and watching Netflix or whatever while they pay the bill. No, nothing works like that. It never has in history, and it won't this time.
It reminds me of what Catherine Austin Fitts talked about, that the slavery is, it's never gone away.
Oh yeah,
It's
it
the
is.
number one most profitable business.
Yeah, it's a
there is.
slave system. It's an excellent point. Absolutely. What do you got?
So George Vankovich says, does that mean your thoughts could be trademarked by Neuralink? Steal your ideas.
Well, it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that, because a story just came out. I had warned about that. I'm trying to think. Like, I did a show on this, I think, like a long time ago, 8 years ago. And it's all about, I always thought, so you have to understand that I came out of the tech world to a certain degree. So when they were talking about things like Facebook and all the rest of it, I knew that they were going to be vacuuming up people's data. It was just not one of those things that people cared about at the time. But what they were doing was they had something called, when I was in those circles, it was called semantic web. This thing never really came out to the public. And semantic web was something where they would use people's conversations as a way to train an organism. And it was basically like a version of AI that was all audio based. And when I heard about that, I realized, they're taking all the messages that people are leaving back and forth in messages and Messenger and all the rest of it, and you sign your life away just to use the app, right? And now they had Siri and everything else listening to your conversations. We know all the things that take place there. So now there's something coming out about how Facebook is saying, by the end of the year, unless you opt out, we're going to use all of your messages and all of your conversations and all your private stuff that you've done on our servers as a way to train our AI bots. Now, they've already been doing that. This is just getting the legal permission. There's no question. I think they've been doing that since 2004, whenever they came out. And we know that Apple listens to everything, you know, through the Siri and all the rest of it. And they just have this perennial thing going on. And they are training the AI fast. The AI makes tons of mistakes, even though they train it fast. And one of the things that's been coming up, of course, is that they're having tremendous problem getting insurance to insure certain types of artificial intelligence endeavors. That tells you it's a very unstable technology. Now, here's another thing about AI that we need to understand. So there's a guy who goes to make a UFO documentary for the Nixon White House in the early 70s. And we've done a couple of shows around that whole thing. But what happens is he's out there and they're giving him a tour of the Pentagon. One of the things that he sees are these guys with these electrodes to their temple, and they're watching a TV screen. And what they're seeing on the TV screen roll out is the images. So somebody says, you know, the Tower of Pisa, or, you know, the White House, or Rome, you know, whatever it is. And there's the static stuff forming on the screen about their thoughts. That's 1973. Now, artificial intelligence, Marvin Minsky, and all the rest of it. Remember, Minsky is very close with Colonel Sanders' daughter. We did the whole program on that. The Epstein people tried to blackmail Minsky. Nobody could really figure out what was going on there. Well, if you realize that Colonel Sanders' daughter was the #1 person for searching for ancient ruins there off Bimini in the Bahamas, you get a much better idea of the type of information that they were looking for. So, you know, we need to keep these connections in mind as we move along. But hopefully that answers your question. Yes. What do you got?
David Donaway, what I don't understand is if an elite has power to get to Mars and back, surely they have AI robots to replace most humans like yesterday. Why the delay?
Well, you don't want to pick a fight with 8 billion people, do you? I don't think they're ready to pick a fight with 8 billion people. Not yet. But I think that they will, at a certain point, corral them. You've seen these dry runs. They need an emergency, you know. So they need something to trigger off emergency powers. That's how they can consolidate it. But they have to be truly ready to do it. In my opinion, they've built up the UFO threat to get emergency powers. And if you study the emergency powers, it's something that so many people in government know so little about. I've spent a long time looking into it, the continuity of government program and the COG program, through the work of Professor Scott and others. And it's very simple. As soon as they have COG powers, they have an emergency where they flip the COG switch, and we live under martial law. And the ruler then becomes the NORTHCOM commander. He's the combatant commander of the United States. And he's also the leader of NORAD. And he is, NORTHCOM, COG combatant commander, and NORAD. He's all three. And right now, this General Gio, big UFO connection with him, Fort McDill. The guy previously was actually part of this same group, the 509th, who had discovered the Roswell wreckage. He wasn't around for that, but it's the same group, but he joined much later. So COG has a weird, very strange UFO connection whenever you get into it. Now, I think it's very interesting that Walter Kern, people are familiar with his work, and he does a show with Matt Taibbi, and he has, a long history of research and he's a commentator on all these different things in society. And he watches the show, and, once in a while we trade things. He was promoting part of this, David Grush interview. And the problem is, as I told him, David Grush was controlled by Mellon and hasn't said, well, I'm not controlled by Mellon anymore, so we can't really trust what he has to say. One of the things that came up was he started talking about how in 2020 they had a general all ready to take over for COVID. Well, he didn't say what he was talking about, but I'm sure he knows from this program and others that that's the continuity of government program. And that's the person that they had ready was the general that I called out for leaking all this stuff to Newsweek, saying we have this group that's ready. They had this was openly in a Newsweek article during 2020 leading up to January 6th and all that. So they had a program there for the continuity of government. Remember, continuity of government isn't a mythical thing. They activated it on September 11th. That's how we got Northcom. So Northcom is a military unit that's attached to the United States. You never had a military unit that is there in case the United States isn't under control. You might have always assumed, well, there's the National Guard or the military or whatever, but Northcom is a dedicated function to control, America. And that only came about through the September 11th emergency. So once we start thinking about these things, it's pretty interesting. But I'm sure that Walter Kern, in what he was saying, was referring directly to what we were putting out at the time about it. And he was saying, well, I'm getting this from my own inside sources. So, that just really verified a lot of the work that we were putting out there about it. COG is real. And what's weird is one of the wonderful things that Professor Scott brought forward in all of his deep state research about this is that he said, whenever you look into a deep event in American history, there's always COG personnel involved. And when I went through it over and over again, from Watergate to the Kennedy assassination, to Iran-Contra, to 9/11, to the financial coup d'etat, to COVID, I always found COG people. And he was pointing out, look, John Dean came right out of COG, and then he's Nixon's lawyer. He's the one who gives him up, basically. With Kennedy, the person who was operating with COG was the Secret Service agent Winston Lawson, who's the one who sets up the Dallas route. Oliver North, COG. Well, he's Iran-Contra, all that funny business going on with Iran-Contra and the black budget. He's COG. Dick Cheney, continuity of government. Donald Rumsfeld, continuity of government. Well, they activate the stuff on September 11th, and Cheney goes into the 9/11 bunker. So there's a lot in how that secret world works. And the thing is, the more we know about it, the less of a temptation it is for them to pull the pin and do it. So, it's very important, I think, for us to bring this to the fore. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. Whew, deep tonight, but I'm not leaving out the Steiner spiders. No, because this description of artificial intelligence is so crucial. I'm going to read that next, and then we'll take the rest of your questions. Miss Olivia, what do you got?
On that note, Karen Carpenter says spider beings. Max Spears and Harold Kautz Vila talked a lot about spider beings associated with electromagnetic frequency. Spider beings also associated with legendary black goo. Jacqueline Diamond says, yep, on both of those. They spoke of spider beings, but also Russian physicists talked of parasitic alien spider beings capturing our entire planet eons ago. And Nena said, St. Hildegard of Bingen, one of my favorites, 1,000 years ago, said she saw the world covered in giant webs in the future.
Yeah, I think there's a looking out from a visionary track and seeing these things. And of course, a lot of the things that were cited or mentioned there, I think they kind of stand on their own. I don't really see them in relation to what Steiner was talking about. I think those might have to be looked at in its own light. And then if there are correlations, then there are correlations. But this I found very prophetic if you think about how to convey things to people there in the future. So here's a few notes where he says this is all connected with the moon, keeping this in mind. Most of you will have read the book An Outline of Esoteric Science and will have realized that one of the great events in earthly evolution was the separation of the moon from the earth. The moon we see today shining towards us from cosmic space was once united with the Earth, then separated from the Earth, and now circles around it as a satellite. We know what incisive changes in the whole sweep of evolution are connected with the separation of the moon and the Earth. We must go far back in time before the Atlantean deluge, find the epoch when the moon departed from the body of the Earth. Today, we will confine ourselves to what came to pass on Earth in connection with the being of man and the kingdom of nature around him as a consequence of the separation of the moon from the Earth. So Steiner sees this separation as a kind of the defining moment and sort of part of the evolutionary problem in echo that we're having right now. So there's a thing in here which is has a reference that may give us some idea about alien life, as it were, depending on how you're seeing it. And remember, Steiner's coming in seeing things from a spiritual angle. So we have a constant need to physicalize these things. Oh, it's a physical space being coming toward me. Well, they operate somewhere else. Speaking generally, what is the attitude adopted by the human race? The human race is behaving very shabbily. Actually, I'm going to read the setup to the quickening of the life of shadow pictures of the intellect. And part of what Steiner's saying is that the intellect in this period is darkening and the imagination is becoming dark, and that's creating an effect. You remember a passage that I wrote dealing with the time when human souls ascended to the planets and afterwards descended once more to Earth existence. I spoke of how the Mars men, the Jupiter men, and others descended again to the Earth. Now, an event of great significance came to pass at the end of the 70s of the last century, so the 1870s. And it is an event that can be described only in the light of facts which are revealed to us in the spiritual world, whereas in the days of old Atlantis, human beings came down to Earth from Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and so on. That is to say, beings of soul were drawn into the realm of Earth existence. You see how that works? They're coming in the stream of soul. They're not coming in spaceships. They're being drawn in. And what he has to say is that since the end of the 70s of the last century, so since the end of the 1870s, beings not of the human order have been descending to the Earth for the purposes of their further development. From cosmic realms beyond the Earth, they come down to the Earth and enter into a definite relationship with human beings. Since the 80s of the 19th century, super-earthly beings have been seeking to enter the sphere of Earth existence. Just as the Vulcan men were the last to come down to Earth, now Vulcan beings are actually coming into the realm of earthly existence. Super-earthly beings are already here, and the fact that we are able to have a connected body of spiritual science at all today is due to the circumstance that these beings from beyond the Earth are bringing the messages from the spiritual world down into Earth experience. So he's basically saying this whole thing about the mystery schools bringing out these truths and all the rest of it, the very reason that we have these mysteries coming public is because there's this stream of higher beings coming in. Speaking generally, what is the attitude adopted by the human race? The human race is behaving, if I may put it so very shabbily, to these beings who are appearing from the Earth and the cosmos and coming down slowly and by degrees. It is true to the Earth. The human race does not concern itself with them. It ignores their existence. And it is this which will plunge the Earth into tragic conditions, for in the course of the next centuries, more and more spiritual beings will be among us. Beings whose language we ought to understand, and this is possible only if we try to grasp what comes from them, namely the substance and content of spiritual science. They want to give it to us, and they want us to act in the sense of spiritual science. Their desire is that spiritual science be translated into social behavior in the action of the Earth. Now, I'm going to fast forward from that very fascinating interval there of that statement by Steiner to this thing about the other side of this question. And it works something like this. It'll be quite possible for men of the earth, if they so wish, to develop a more and more automatic form of intellect. And that can also happen amid conditions of barbarism. Full and complete manhood, however, cannot come to an expression in such a form of intellect. And men will have no relationship to the beings who would fain come towards them in earth existence. And all those beings of whom men have had such an erroneous conception, because the shadowy intellect can only grasp the mineral nature and crudely material nature of the world. This swarm will seize upon the earth and spread over the earth like a network of ghastly spider-like creatures of an order lower than that of plant existence. But possessed of overpowering wisdom, these spidery creatures will all be interlocked with one another, and in their outward movements they will imitate the thoughts that men have spun out of their shadowy intellect, like repeating of AI information.
100%.
So it's based on our intellect, and that's it. There's no empathy there. These spidery creatures will be interlocked in their outward movements. They will imitate the thoughts of men as they have spun out of the shadowy intellect, and has not allowed itself to be quickened by the new form of imaginative knowledge of spiritual science. All the thoughts that lack substance and reality will then be endowed with being. Boy, have we seen this taking place. But Steiner goes further. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
The earth will be surrounded, as it is now, with air, and as it is sometimes in swarms of locusts, with a brood of terrible spider-like creatures, half mineral, half plant, interweaving with masterly intelligence. It is true, but with intensely evil intent. And insofar as man has not allowed his shadowy intellectual concepts to be quickened to life, his existence will be united not with the beings who have been trying to descend since the last third of the 19th century from a spiritual level, but with this ghastly brood of half mineral, half plant-like creatures. He will have to live together with these spider-like creatures to continue his cosmic existence within the order of evolution into which this brood will then enter. This is a destiny that is very emphatically part of human evolution upon the earth, and it is quite well known today by many of those who try to hold humanity back from the knowledge of spiritual science. For there are men who are actually conscious allies of this process of the entanglement of earth existence with these beings. We must no longer allow ourselves to be shocked by descriptions of this kind. Such facts are the background of what is often said today by people who, out of old traditions, still have some consciousness of these things, who then see fit to surround them with a veil of mystery. But it's not right any longer for this process of earthly evolution or humanity to be veiled in a mystery. You can't just keep it in the mystery school forever. You have to let it out for the public, because the public is going to be overwhelmed. However great the resistance, these things must be said, for as I constantly repeat, the acceptance or rejection of spiritual scientific knowledge is a grave matter for all mankind.
So he's saying there's no way out of it.
Well, not
the only way is through.
Yeah. Well, you have to become aware of it. First of all, that's the only way you can cut it down. But if it's already being organized here since the late 19th century, and that we're facing the outcome here. So the way to turn it around that he's suggesting basically lies in the conscious application of these things. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist show. Whew, Steiner blowing our minds from 1921 with the mystery school warning of what lies in wait. And of course, immediately as this came up, in the heart of it, the echoes of AI and Neuralink and Altman and Musk and Jesus came out of a computer, virgin birth, echoed through my mind. And it's funny, I'll tell you, the first time I read this, I was probably about 14 years old. And what it said to me, especially there's a section that comes up in here about how Ahriman gives everyone their own unique clairvoyance in the future, and how the ultimate outcome of all this and the divisions that get caused is that the right side of a person's body goes to war against the left side of a person's body, and the war of all against all ensues. Shows us that we're in the middle of a gigantic dynamic, in the heart of this dynamic. And so, when I go to report on something like the UFO file being misused by intelligence groups to create a threat, or if we talk about, the process of assassination, or if we talk about the secret societies and the things that they're doing, it all comes around to becoming more aware of the environment that we're operating in. And it's not for a hopelessness type thing. It is to really get sharp on what's happening here. And when you see, as I've talked to people, I'm telling you, people who are very smart, I will sit there and because of their adamant belief in a particular thing, say UFO disclosure, they will say, I don't care if the CIA goes around assassinating people. As long as they give me the truth about aliens, I'm going to believe it. So you can see the absurdity of the thing. And I'll tell you, the way that we would understand people doing this is, and falling into these traps, is in the Gurdjieff work. And of course, tonight was more about Steiner and Cayce. But in the Gurdjieff work, he talks about something called buffers. And buffers, psychological, in the nervous system, in other places, they exist there and they create a denial because they can't live in reality. And so those buffers that we see so active in society, of course, anyone who studied it would know intelligence agencies wouldn't give the public the right answers about anything because they practice in intelligence and they're not going to share that with you, especially around something like the UFO file, which they consider a tremendous advantage. So there is no, there's just no talking to a person who believes on that level. They're just stuck with it. And it's happened over the years. Like, I'm going to do a little mini history here for the next 60 seconds. When I came out and did this program, we came out with the Truth Around the Secret Space program. Gaia TV set up all these stooges to imitate all of the deep work that we were doing with government people and, Jim Mars, Joseph Farrell, Linda Moulton Howe, all these really high-level people and information. And conferences and all that stuff. Gaia TV came out and did this imitation of it. Then we blew up their imitation by saying, this guy is fake, this other guy, plagiarist, and they're not going into space, that's all BS. And there were shocked people who came out of that Gaia thing. Gaia wrote in their own white paper, we were doing well, we were tracking well, with building up subscriptions around this false, they didn't say false, but their version of the secret space program thing. And guess what? Then this show came along and we had issues. That's in their own white paper about why they weren't growing around this thing and how they were moving their attention into other ventures. So you see, you can be one lone outpost armed with the truth. You can cause all of these shakeups, not because you're a troublemaker, but because you're interested in the truth. And especially in that case, the major plagiarization that was going on was absurd. Then we got into 2017. Myself and Gigi Young came out and denounced the TTSA UFO threat thing immediately in 2018, long before anybody else. A lot of their main critics now are people who cozied up in the beginning. And a lot of the, unfortunately, that's good that people saw the light and got out of there. Some people stuck with it. Some people still are like, hey, TTSA and Lou and all that stuff. Richard Dolan and people like that. So you can see the absurdity of the world that they live in. They're like, we're looking for the truth or whatever. And they start working with intelligence people because they think, they're going to get a Netflix series or something. I don't know what they're thinking, but it's ridiculous. So it's always been my motto that if you're in the truth-telling business, then you have to look for the truth. And if you can't, say the truth, then you get out of the business. But that didn't peter down into other people. Okay. So we went against that thing and faced all the opposition and all those people saying these things to us like, oh, you can't be against disclosure. It doesn't matter if it's CIA people or whatever. Then the New York Times story fell apart, and Leslie Kean said, well, yeah, I didn't really, I left all this stuff, other stuff out. And David Grush, yeah, I left out all the stuff that he said about bodies because we were just wanted to push the UFO threat in order to people, to get whipped up about the threat. And then Gary Nolan came out and said, yeah, actually, I'm friends with Dr. Fauci. And yeah, we did try to pull a UFO threat because the public wouldn't, we couldn't get anything from the public. They wouldn't listen to us. So we started to make it like a threat. He said that in a SALT conference. And the SALT conference, that's to raise venture capital money. So this is the truth of the situation, So here we are. And we get into 2025. We have Peter Thiel sending his people out, imitating this show. And finally, they're sitting there with Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan's talking about the Virgin Mary is a computer who pumps out Jesus, And in the meantime, as we've put these important things out about the UFO threat, some people have caught on to this. The ideas from them has caught on to this. Other people are wasting their time and energy on, nonsense. So, somewhere in real media, not because independent media is paid media, just like the corporate media, somewhere like this dark journalism that we're doing here, and that you can see by the people we have as guests on the program, etc. It is possible for us to do that. We can bring forward the main thing, and it can disrupt the narratives that they're pushing. The public can go over a cliff looking for, Macron's gender or whatever. I don't care about that. I care about the CIA launching a UFO threat. I care about the continuity of government program being activated. I care about the laws that are being violated by the intelligence agencies inside and outside of the country. I care about the technocratic takeover. So, this is what we're about. And these are the things, that's the shake it up for 2026. Because if you don't get to this stuff, we're not going to be able to understand what's happening in the environment. We will be clueless. And, Neuralink and SpaceX and Altman and all these people are going to throw everybody out of work. And they're going to have the support of the people who are promoting this digital control grid. So there's no longer, you got to have to integrate the information and work it out. But the idea of being in denial about it is not going to happen. For 2026, it's shake it up. I think it's a good way to put it.
So
and with that, Miss Olivia,
let me
you're
get
next.
some clarity on this.
Yeah.
Okay. So if Steiner says there's no way we're going to have to coexist with the guy. Yes.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Okay. Because that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And then what is it that we have the power to push back against? One thing, I think Neuralink, yes, being chipped, yes, definitely. But how do you see us expressing our power?
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Times?
Yeah, it is something that is individual in any case. I started the show saying we have legislative, legal, executive branches. We have a voting process. We have a number of tools at our disposal. They're tools of getting this information out that can shake up the entire thing. Because again, when the word gets out, it defeats the ignorance. It defeats the pressure on the other side. So, what you said, Miss Olivia, is very interesting because you said it sounds like Steiner says we're going to have to coexist with this thing. In a way, that's true. He's saying this is how it's going to go. But he's opening up the possibility here that through, basically lessening the effect of this thing, through higher awareness, through bringing in that awareness of the Ahrimanic power of technology, siphoning off humanity's creativity and spirituality and turning us into the Atlantean automaton that Edgar Cayce talks about, and the automaton is a product of those Atlantean Belial scientists. And they use the automaton, which is basically like the Optimus robot, but mixed with human parts, sometimes mixed with animal parts. And they create a divergent soul path for this creature to use as a slave. Well,
I'm sorry, are we getting into a place, people have been talking about purebloods, like for the last 5 years, right? And where we are.
Who's going to maintain themselves against?
Who's going to maintain their
yeah.
actual pure humanity? Because so many people are going to jump on this train. Because there will be many lures.
Yes.
One will be, you'll never age, right? You'll be able to. It'll be vanity that'll get you, right?
Yes.
Or you'll be like almost bionic, so you'll
be
for athletes,
the enhanced human.
So everybody has their interest about why they would choose to get shipped. And the people who want to keep themselves and purely human, we're going to become a minority, right?
Yes.
Is this the idea?
Yeah, it is. There's no question about it. There's a split there. There's already a split in who is accepting, we saw this during COVID. When we take it up to this level, they're going to offer it as an enhancement. Hey, you're enhanced. And how many people wouldn't like to be enhanced, right? Unfortunately, this is part of the system that they're developing. The only way, in my opinion, to blunt its impact is to reverse engineer where it came from. So Steiner's back here saying there are already groups getting ready for this idea of the spider beings interlocking all over. He's definitely talking about the technology and the sentience that they're going to create with the technology, and what they've already created with AI. And now they're just like, oh yeah, AI's taken over, and we're getting rid of all these people, like the 1 million layoffs this year. So this is where we can say, oh no, this is not something that we're going along with. That if businesses integrate AI, you could limit them. You could say, well, you can make 5 to 10% of your business AI, and we'll measure the results of that. But if you make the whole business AI and you throw the people out, then it's against the law. And there's a number of things that can happen here. Now, the warnings have come and they've said, well, China will get ahead of us and they'll do it and all the rest. Look, if you go up against China and you say, if you use 100% AI for the stuff that you're doing, there's a number of things that we can bring to bear against you, so that if you try to outcompete us because we're being more ethical, so there's a lot of government pressure and weight that you can put into a situation. There's influence. The problem is these people think that they're in an easy game, and that, Elon and stuff like that thinks he has 25 trillion valuation on Tesla. And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. You'll have UBI and there won't even be money in a few years. So chill out, They think that they'll get away with that rhetoric and that the public is stupid, And Altman thinks the public is stupid. And Bezos thinks the public is stupid. So the question is, the public can demonstrate. One person can demonstrate. We're demonstrating it right here tonight on this show. Demonstrate an awareness around it, not an irrational fear of it. It's not a superstition. The broader picture may come from Cayce and Steiner's cosmology, but the stats, Optimus, the things that they want to do for that, the telepathy patent, those things are real, So it's a very sound approach, shall we say, but it has an esoteric basis. Yeah.
Okay. So I've never studied the Steiner work. So in his system, what is the point of incarnating into a?
Oh yeah, well that's a large.
I think it's pertinent here.
Yeah, no,
this is what they're creating is a different trajectory.
It is, absolutely. Well, there's no question that it is, it's a spiritual theme that Steiner is going for with spiritual science, that you are developing your spiritual ability. It's a spiritual, mental, physical interface. But
and that the human body is designed specifically for that.
yeah,
And
there
you can
it
develop
is.
it,
It's a
and
good
it's
point.
your responsibility
Yeah.
to develop it. Yes.
Yeah, what you're saying is a good point, because it's a misuse of you as a being, what is being ginned up and created here. So
Well,
it
you're
is,
hacking the system
yeah,
instead of earning whatever it is.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly, right. And there's a thing in, it's a spiritual tradition, but it comes out of the Cayce work, where he says, they who climb up some other way become thieves and robbers. And you could really think of this as thieves and robbers. But there's a genuine kind of tree of life, spiritual development and choice and all the rest of it. This is the key in the mystery school, the eighth sphere overlay, the harmonic work. They know what's coming in. And there's a hint there. How do we seed this into the public's consciousness? So by the 21st century, it becomes awareness. So when Steiner's doing that, when he's there in 1921, telling us this, it is somehow, this is laying the foundations. And it's interesting to me, he talks about the 100 years, because that's a century cycle. That is very fascinating. Everyone, it is the Dark Journalist X series episode 210, Atlantis Tuaoi Ahriman, Transhumanist Terror 2026. We've laid it out in a number of different directions, and it's fantastic to have so many of you here. We're going to take a couple more of your questions.
I got a lot more questions.
Well, we've got about 12 minutes left, so
Okay.
we'll keep doing it. Yes.
All right. So let's start with this one. Deep State, you're fired. Doesn't Ilana Freeland suggest we use our minds to, quote, control the swarm of nanobots? Could this type of technique be used against the spider swarm Steiner warns of?
Yeah, I mean, the more control you have over your own mind, there's so many things that are like that whole 100th monkey aspect. I always go back to that, which is, if one person becomes aware, it spreads. It's just something clicks in humanity. And very often people think, well, the system's so far gone, or they're too much in control with the technology, it's never going to stop. It's not actually true, because there are weaknesses, there are trip hammers involved, and there are perils to the moves that they're trying to make. One, they're exposing themselves and coming out very nakedly and brazenly during the COVID operation, during 9/11, during the terror campaigns and things of this nature. It comes around and people look at it and like, yeah, they do get more consolidated control, but people tend to look a little more at them like, what are you up to? Is this a depopulation program? What exactly are your plans for the human race? Where are you coming from? What type of person are you? Are you a person? These are the types of questions that come in. So I think what we see Steiner doing is giving us the tools. Even choosing Ahriman is quite fascinating, because Ahriman is a Persian, dark astral. He's the Persian devil, basically. But it's very interesting that Steiner does this, and he also teaches us to separate Lucifer from Ahriman and the evolutionary track that we've come in on these different epochs, the influence on this side or that side. So he's got three forces operating there: Lucifer, Ahriman, and Christ. So when you take it from that perspective, you are you're in a situation as a human being where we've come across a certain period of time where we're supposed to apprehend a certain amount of knowledge. And the way that Steiner describes it is, you're either apprehending the knowledge for Christ, for Ahriman, or for Lucifer. And at this particular period in history, Lucifer and Ahriman are working side by side. It's odd, because in Steiner's work and in theosophy, Lucifer had a different track with humanity at different times. The arts, many other things came through that interaction. But the priests and the Upanishads and things of that nature, they knew how to get the gnosis from the interaction with those beings without carrying out their directives and things of this nature. So there's a lot there. I think that Steiner gives us an incredible tapestry. And then when it comes to the Atlantean background and how it links to the future, Cayce gives us something that is remarkable, which is we've been through this destruction before and we're angling up now to face it again. And that the same people coming in during the world wars and things like that, they are incarnating in huge droves. The Atlanteans were coming back to face off again. That is crucial. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist show. It's X-Series 210, the Atlantis Tuaoi Ahriman Terror 2026. I always feel like we should do more on the Tuaoi stone and its scientific validity and its spiritual impact. I think that's something that Cayce gave us. The name also so very strange. And, you know, there's some etymology around the name that it's Samoan, which is odd. So meaning that some group that, you know, there was a huge egress out of Atlantis and somehow they ended up over there in Samoa. So, but whatever it is with the name, there's some resonance there with the period of time that we're in. Your next question, Miss Olivia.
Deep State, you're fired again. Doesn't Theosophy say the evil ones / Belial types have group mind and high intelligence, but not love? Would love be a key way to stay human? Also, Najat, I wonder if online community rants and hate contribute to the spidery beings. We humans have to bring morality to AI. If we leave it to them, then spirituality will be removed.
Oh, yeah. That makes me think of auras, you know, and Cayce has some wonderful stories about auras and how he could see around an angry person this red aura, and he saw what it was doing to their organs. It was destroying their physical activity. And he would see different colors and things for people who are artistic or helpful. And there's an incredible story of him in New York about to go into this Macy's elevator, and he stops because he sees all the people have no aura, and he realizes, uh-oh, what's going on there? And there's a terrible accident, and the elevator drops. Now, but these things are fascinating. What's interesting to me is that at times, Cayce, when he was talking to somebody, when they would talk about a particular issue, he could see their past life in their aura. So if they were, you know, Native American medicine chief in a previous life or something, he starts to see that the colors start to manifest the picture. So I think that that's deep. And relating it to the spider thing, I mean, we obviously see the amplification of everything. So, you know, the good intentions and the bad intentions are both amplified by the technology at this point in history. But you can see that there's a kind of a brainwashing that's taking place. And if the goal is division, which we've seen laid out for control over and over again, whether it's racial or, you know, religion, you know, whatever it happens to be, that is once you're in that state, if you're in a state where you're excited to hatred, or, you know, it's a psychotic state to be in, you become highly suggestible when you are upset and out of your center. And this is part of the problem with the era that we're in, which is people you see all the time are out of their center. And it's interesting because a show like this and the thoughtful intention of the Ideas Room, you know, so that combination of the X-Series Dark Journalist show and the Ideas Room is very, very different, you'll notice, from other things that are out there. And I don't mean that just to make like we're great and everyone else is terrible, because there are fantastic, wonderful people doing fantastic, wonderful work. But I just mean in terms of, you know, the zeitgeist, everything is about whipping you into a frenzy, right? Everything is about 3 Atlas is coming to get you. And the UFO threat is coming for you. And, you know, religious clashes and they know how to whip you into a state like that. And I understand, you know, entertainment, I understand news, it's some kind of strange kind of trick of history that I was given just the right kind of experience in my life where I could see certain things. And one of the things that I could see is that, there's an intel factor massaging how people look at things. There's a marketing factor that is massaging how people are looking at things, which is why I'm so against what's become of the podcast field, because I know the money, you wouldn't believe the money that has gone into those fields and the people behind it who are promoting them. You'd really stop and take a look at some of those shows and be like, oh, that's supposed to be independent media, but there's $40 million from this very corrupt group propping it up. A lot of that's going to come out, but that and PR. So there's something interesting and about it all that I have seen. I know how those things operate, and so in the independent media, they're right in your face, and the public doesn't get it because they think, oh, it's it's the media. They must be telling me the right thing, and they started to learn that the corporate media was lying to them. The next thing they need to learn is that the independent media, by and large, is bought and paid for and lying to them. So you're going to need a third way. And, you can get some, like I said, with the financial publications like Wall Street Journal and Fortune and things like that, you can still, you can get interesting and important information from almost anything. But when it comes to where the rubber meets the road, you're going to need a real outlet that is willing to tell you the truth at any cost, and present the facts, and not just, play to you or some hatred of some group, or to play you off against some figure. And, the 2 minutes hate from 1984, a lot of what we want to do with the show is present the information, give you something to work with, but also not be in that whirlwind. And I think that's where the value is. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. We're going to take the final 2 questions tonight on this very special episode featuring Edgar Cayce and, of course, the great Edgar Cayce, Sleeping Prophet, and Anthroposophy's Rudolf Steiner, and his incredible, compelling visions of Ahriman and the 21st century. And of course, Cayce and Atlantis. Yes, Miss Olivia.
Okay, so I'm going to fold all these together. So
As only you
because they're all
can.
related.
Okay.
Everybody's talking about the beast. Vanguardian Speak says, DJ, Steiner is describing the structure of the beast system. The Antichrist is likely an AI avatar extension of the beast. Dan Farrell says, a beast in the Bible is something non-human. The beast in Revelations needs an image to be seen and worshipped. I think it's pretty clear the beast is an AI. And Nutter Butter says the mark of the beast is some fundamental alteration of mind that allows your mind to be seamlessly transferred into the beast mainframe.
Well, it's true. It's true. And it's very strange because the language goes back to Revelation. So John in Patmos is looking out and has this incredible vision. And he sees where these things are going. And he says, oh, I can see this, this thing. They're not going to allow people to transact unless they have the mark of the beast. And for years, you'd hear this thing and you'd say, well, the biggest Bible thumpers in the world, this is their thing. It's the mark of the beast. It's the mark of the beast. Like the boy who cried wolf, etc. Understandably. But there's no question that with what they're doing now, that this vision that John brought forward it's from that mystery vision. It's a saying, it's an impulse to humanity to be aware of this, to be ready for this. And humanity has taken it, one way or another. But there's no question that the thrust of it we can really see today, because even when they were doing the COVID op, they were saying, well, you can only do certain things if you're vaccinated, right? You can't travel, you can't go into the store and all this other stuff. And for you who have remained unvaccinated, there was the experiment there. Can we keep them out of society? Can we make them feel if they don't join us in this? And they got a lot of people to go along with that. But I will say this, their own data convinced them they couldn't pull it off on the scale that they wanted to do. So that says something good about where the direction on some of this can go. I was looking for, to cap the show off, I was going to read this letter, but instead I'm going to show you this, which is one of the main features of the mid-19th century was the advent of the Fox sisters. Fox sisters were so important because they could demonstrate their psychic abilities and their ability to interact with things on the other side of the veil. Now, they were such an important experiment, and it's interesting that Emma Britton, who's one of the founders of Theosophy, talks about being a young psychic and coming to America from England. And her story is remarkable. But when she lands in Manhattan, she sees one of these sisters, very young, walking around with almost something like a sandwich board on, being like a psychic reading. And it's a fascinating environment, and it leads to this spiritualist craze. But this was a method and a movement on the part of the mystery schools to get us aware and to fight off this spiritual materialism that was setting in. And the Fox sisters were absolutely crucial. And they used a number of figures against the Fox sisters to get them off their trail, because at a certain point, the mystery school support withdrew because they were saying, well, we're getting the wrong results. People are thinking that in the afterlife is just like this life, and they're not getting the whole piece that we're laying out here. So the mystery school support withdraws, but then these other groups that want to contain the entire situation basically suppress all the efforts of the Fox sisters to get this out to a broader public. Some of those figures include Horace Greeley, which I found very interesting. And he was basically trying to pay them off to shut up. And one of the sisters married a politician who was deep in the Masonic groups, and he was like, you can't practice any of this stuff. And so they shut all of it off. But very interestingly, their original context started with them hearing voices and tappings and things in this home in upstate New York. And they, had demonstrated through these seances that they were getting these messages, and they really started a craze of people looking into their ability to contact spirits and things. And what's funny is, after this big press campaign against them, and Horace Greeley trying to buy them off, and all the different tricks that they used to get rid of the Fox sisters, oddly enough, in that house, when they tore it down in 1903, they found the skeleton remains of a salesman who was like peddling tinwares or something like that. And they found him inside the wall. So whoever had done him in had, his spirit was there in that house. And the house was known before they moved into it to be haunted. And they just happened to have these incredible psychic abilities. At a certain point, the mystery school said, you know what, we're going to heighten that whole situation. And we're going to bring them, the current that they need for this. And if you go back and you look at those stories of the Fox sisters, it's remarkable the impact that it had. It's like, kind of like a rock star suddenly glows upon them. It's quite fascinating. And also the way that it's shut down from the outside. The mystery schools withdraw, and then that they become the plaything for any kind of force that wants to suppress all of that. And, they die under tragic circumstances, but the message that they brought, just like a lot of the mystics and people from that period, really informed so much of the psychic work that we're able to do here in the 21st century. And that includes when Blavatsky comes on the scene. And, there's never anything like that in that period of time, like her book. ISIS Unveiled and the Secret Doctrine. So there's an incredible movement that takes place there. And with that, Miss Olivia, your last question of the evening.
Okay, well, since it didn't come up tonight, I think I will just ask it. Pono was asking, you can thank CERN for the portals being opened.
Oh, yeah,
Where
yeah.
does CERN fit into this?
No, I think it's crucial. We've covered CERN a lot. I have a special coming up on CERN that's going to go even deeper. But one of the things I want to say is we've proven that the superficial aspect that they're talking about, you know, the looking for the God particle type thing was not the sole purpose, shall we say, of what CERN was all about, but that it had a supernatural purpose. And now we've seen that it's had these impacts on the magnetosphere. And quietly in the background over the course of 15 or 20 years, they're now building one that's 5 times bigger than the original at a budget of $26 billion. And CERN represents an attempt to have dimensional contact and to create a portal with particle smashing. Now, what's interesting is if you go into the history of particle smashing, you're going to see that many of the people we've covered in this program, like the Varian brothers and others, who basically created Silicon Valley, that was their thing. John Trump, the president's uncle, was deeply involved in the particle accelerator. So there's some tie over of advanced technological application on one hand and mystical inference. You know, you're on one hand, you're doing this God particle stuff over here, and then you're conjuring up, you know, Ukul Khan over here in opening what it can do. But something very special about CERN in terms of its ability as a weapon. And that's something that we're going to get into in the CERN special that's coming up, and some very, very spectacular guests on that one. And with that, Miss Olivia,
There are so many good questions. we can get to.
we're going to be back next week. But you can summarize one right now, and we'll exit on that one. Go for it.
Well, somebody was asking, does China already have a robot army?
China. Well, certainly they have the capability.
I've seen promo
Yeah.
videos.
Yes, I've
But
seen.
you never know. Is that AI? Right? Is it real?
Yeah, I mean, they probably don't hide theirs as much as we do. But no, I think. Look, I'm going to be honest that they feed this out to the public just like AI. A lot of this stuff was already done 40 years ago, and the robot aspects. You know, I was reading about drones that they were flying in the 1960s. So, you know, this stuff has been out there. The hand wringing over what will AI do to society? No, they always had it. They always knew what it could do. When it hits society, you have to play this whole game about like, oh, it's new technology. We don't know what's going to happen. But they're far ahead of the general public, probably by about 50 years in relation to this. There's that story of the Defense Department scientist who was talking to someone in 2012, and he said, that whole computer that you have there and hard drive and all that stuff, we had it in 1966. So, you know, they hold back, and then they figure out how to not financially overstimulate the public, and then they bring out the technology when they're ready, and it has the total control, as they did with ARPANET, which is from 1958, and that became DARPANET, Internet, and that's the World Wide Web. So, you know, there are some organic pops and clicks that take place that they don't have any control over. And I think that one of the kind of weaves in time, one of the shafts of light that gets through with a lot of this on the independent side is the work that we're doing here. And I owe a lot of that to you guys in the Ideas Room. So I'm going to leave us with a quote on the Atlantean technology, and then we're going to say goodnight for the evening, but we'll be back. Here we go. A great crowd tonight. By the way, exceptional questions. Off the charts. Fantastic. Okay. This is Cayce now talking about Atlantean technology. Here we go. Remember, there is nothing in the present that hasn't existed from the first, only the form or the manner of its use being changed, and many of the elements that used that the art of has been long lost. As we will see, the reason why, and many are being rediscovered by those so-called scientists in the present, when to that day it was the common knowledge, even of the most illiterate, as would be termed in the present. So even illiterate people understood the measure of physics, astronomy, and things of that nature during the Atlantean period. I've always found that quite remarkable. One more. The entity was young in years when brought in to the household of the son of Axtel, being of those Atlanteans who made for such great changes in the conditions and affairs of the land and the people. The entity then was in the position of what would be called an engineer in the broader sense, not only the engineer of being able to lay out the lands, the construction and the bridges and the viaducts and the ships and things, or activities that made for the preservation of same, but in the holy things, in the building of the altars of the Temple of Beauty. And the name then was X-210. It's very interesting because the Temple of Beauty and, these temples that were built were basically to bring people in society into that higher. So the same thing that the Cayce readings did later, when people would suddenly be looking after their diet, when they would suddenly be doing meditation, when they would be getting osteopathy or massage or whatever it is. This was all comes from Cayce running the Temple Beautiful when he's Rata. One more, and then we're gone with Cayce. The entity began to work with the priest Rata on bringing order in the general chaos that existed through those troublesome turmoils and periods, and pyramids too, and aided the trust and the directing and establishing of the truths, the practical application of the laws, as would be termed in the present, pertaining to those things that made for chemistry, building, commerce, labor, economic conditions, and schools and educational centers, the varied activities as would be classified in such experiences in the present day. And he goes on to talk about how the Atlanteans come in with their airships and their advanced technology into an Egypt that's a little more primitive, and they bring in all of this culture. And the problem is they also bring in the thing, the automatons. They're cyborgs from the Atlantean scientists. And the people in the Egyptian land are, what are we supposed to do with this? And the Atlanteans treat, the Belial Atlanteans treat the automatons like, slaves, and they're like, oh, they're not capable of spiritual development. Forget them. They're like this weird hybrid of mineral and man. Forget it. Sometimes we'll mix an animal in to make sure that they're strong or whatever. And it's quite fascinating because they're so trained to do that when they come in, the natives in Egypt, they start treating them like the thing as well. So Cayce's story of that whole period is interesting because of the advancements that are already taking place. We're already in an age of flight. We're already in an age of advanced technology, and this is after the sinking of Atlantis. So we have to kind of wrap our minds around that as we think about the mystery picture that is painted in the work of Edgar Cayce and Rudolf Steiner.
Yeah, you know what I'm thinking about?
Yeah.
You know how there are different, it's Brave New World, right? Where there's different tiers
Yes.
based on colors, right?
Yes.
So
the epsilons.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about transhumanism and how, they are selling it to us like everybody's going to be equal. Like everybody's going to get equal chips. We're all going to be equally gorgeous, and we're going to equally live long lives and be equally brilliant and all this kind of stuff. But it seems to me, with the things story that you just told, that once they can ship you to be, or they can adjust you to be at certain levels. There's always going to be a lower level. There's going to be, a caste system.
No question.
And they can treat accordingly.
Well, what they're selling us with the UBI thing and all the rest of it is that oh, you can be non-productive and still have a great life and we'll pay for it. It's never happened in history. 1, 2, the minute you stop being productive, that's it. Okay. And
Well, look at
3,
what they did to the elderly in
oh,
the old
yes.
folks' homes during COVID. Hello.
Yeah.
Bedazzling.
Oh,
and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Like, the second they can get rid of you, they will.
It doesn't,
When you're not adding to the revenue of the state.
exactly. Yeah. When they don't need you, I mean, forget it. So that whole thing is a pipe dream. As somebody said pipe organ, and I said pipe dream. That's good synchronicity. And with that, Miss Olivia, a fantastic ending. This is it.
Okay.
So give us the super chat.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll give you the final quote.
Okay. Hold on. Let me get it. By the way, we were very throttled tonight, from what I understand. And your image kept freezing.
Oh, yeah.
The audio was okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think we've been under hardcore censorship ever since the CIA bash of Age of Disclosure. And I'm not surprised.
And we had a lot of trolls on that.
Oh, yeah.
Also, much more than usual. Okay.
Excellent point.
We have Jens 4018, Eurythmy is Fun, Wolfgang McCarthy, 31 Rowan, Pepe Le Pew Pew, Erica Swenson Elliott, J.M. Parsons, Boipa, Durban Downey, Harry Zeri, Grace Vibration, Robert Scott, Global Atlantis 101, Grace Vibration, Debbie McAdoo, Wendy Joe, Back from the Road, Wolf Ross, Jessica Rodriguez, Tim Houston, Karen Carpenter, Natty 22 Love, Zero Infinity Live, The Bikini Truther, Mike Brosnahan, Corey Cartier, The Ripple 1111, Linda 3430, and B Brax. Thank you so much for your generous super chats tonight.
Wow. Thank you very much for your support. And to all our subscribers, thank you. We couldn't do the work that we do without you. And we appreciate your support. And for the things we're up against, we're going to need it. We're going to see you all. I'm going to do a couple of shout outs here before we go. And give you a quote, Miss Olivia. You want to read a quote? Or do I should do that?
Sure.
So it's in the future there. And it's
Cayce?
no, that's Steiner. It's in the future. See it? Read that.
In the future, just that small little clip.
Mhm.
Okay. In the future, through voluntary movements, the heart will carry what takes place in the human soul into the external world.
Fascinating. So, see, Cayce has, Steiner has some visions for the good things that are going to come. And it's very interesting. I've pointed out before that theosophy, is like, hey, we're going into the next root race, the new epoch. People are going to have psychic abilities. They're going to realize war is stupid and all this great stuff. And Steiner's like, yeah, but there's Ahriman. So you're going to have to get past that. So somehow the theosophical work leapfrogs over that.
There was one question I didn't get to, which
my
really
Lord.
have to
Yeah,
ask.
what do you got?
Okay, all right, it's David Donaway. Was Ahriman working on the Atlantis civilization? Was that the first attempt?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And he had full control. What's interesting is he had moved on from the deluge, and he was about to obtain full control of North America. And there's an incredible showdown that takes place with the ultimate black magician, who is this Ahrimanic magician operating out of Mexico. And it's during the time of Christ. And Vitzlaputle, who is a Christ-like figure, faces off against him. And the Mexican mysteries, the Mayan mysteries in the Steiner work are mind-blowing. I think there was a lot there. It came up, it was in, I think, X-13 and 14.
I would love a show on that.
Yeah. Oh, no question. No question. It's absolutely fascinating. And what's quite interesting is, there's this thing with crucifixion in Steiner's work that goes beyond what we understand normally about it. And so Christ's crucifixion is the crucifixion of the entire era of humanity, So it's very fascinating. But what takes place on the opposite continent there in Mexico is that Vitzlaputle crucifies Ahriman's black magician. So it's like locking away this dark force. And what's also interesting is that when we talk about the Mars body and things of this nature, Cayce talks about planetary sojourns. So when we leave this world, we go into the body of what is these other worlds, and they're just not in the same physical bodies. And Cayce, of course, has said that the Venusian, when we go into the Venusian life, it's very similar to the physical life. But it's very interesting that he talks about how Buddha was crucified on Mars. So we might think of it and think, Buddha, the physical body, goes to Mars and gets crucified. But what he was talking about was in the Mars body, Buddha is crucified. So there's something about that crucifixion and the laying down of that, which is such a deep mystical principle, and that basically the entire Christ incarnation is set up for that through the School of the Prophets and the group called the Essenes Seeker After Truth. And they prepare him for this. And in fact, Christ goes through, in the Cayce work, he goes through the entire process of dying and taking up his life again in the Great Pyramid. And he is in the empty sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid. He goes through, that's the Great White Brotherhood doing this whole thing before the actual crucifixion takes place. So the mystical dots in the Cayce and Steiner work are, you could study them a lifetime, and it starts to, all come together. But you're always learning things when you're around this work, and I always am. I always learn new things when it comes to that. What a fantastic gift from these incredible people. And with that, everyone, thank you very much. Let's see. Potent, says Jimmy Lyle Kimmerer. Thank you, sir. It's great to see you out there. Who else we got? We've got Linda Pintle, and she says Cayce was there as an Essene, I think. Yeah, he was Lucius. It's very interesting. His past lives are a fascinating study in and of themselves. Let's see. The show never really ends, Get it, got it. Yes, exactly right. Let's see. We've got Donaway. Well, the Hall of Records, he says, what is that? Wait a minute. Going so fast now. Will the Hall of Records become the Hall of CDs in the future? Exactly. There's no question. Yeah, I remember at one point when they were talking about the things that are in there, one of the things that's in there are recipes. How about that? How'd you like to get into the bottom of the Sphinx and find a book of recipes? That should do it. Good night, DJ, Miss Olivia, in the Ideas Room. Jacqueline Diamond, it's great to see you out there. Who else we got here? We've got Raw. Exactly, Tina Boric. Got it right. Karen Carpenter, thanks for a fun, informative evening. DJ and Olivia, it was great to have all of you here with us. No question about it. ELP. Let's see. So much to learn. Thanks, DJ. CC Sunglasses. Thank you for being with us. Yeah, indeed. That's how I feel. You should see the library, because I'm always getting into those books, and I realize, wow, there's still a lot of books to read here. Okay. Who else we got here? Thank you. Think good things. Exactly. That's what I always say. Michael Bellinger. Epic show. Zadie loves. Thank you. Stay in the love vibration. Thank you, Zadie. Very good. Who else we got here? Nina says. There's Nina says. In Australia, Nina? What time is it in Australia? Host InfoWars soon. Yes. Oh, there's more coming up with Alex. Alex has been doing some great things. Excellent show tonight. Alex knows a great deal about all kinds of spooky things. Very interesting indeed. Great presentation. Thank you, Roger. Great to have you out there. The Eighth Sphere. Thanks. Great X series. Terrific. Wow. And there is B. Brax. Thank you, B. Brax, for your support. One Nation Under Blackmail. Yes. Whitney. We had Whitney on. Great interview, actually. Let's see. What else have we got here? Do a couple more. Death and Transition. Yeah, the pyramid's all about that. Actually, what's interesting is they said the meaning of the empty sarcophagus in the pyramid, according to Cayce, was exactly that, which is the meaning of death is made plain. Let's see what else here. Not only that, but Cayce said that if you learned how to read the different things that are left there as steganography in the pyramid, you're going to find, they said, well, how accurate are the prophecies left in the pyramid? And he said, well, it names people down to the time, this country they were born in, the state, the city, and finally their street address. Well, how's that for accurate? How does it do that? The mystery continues. Beautiful, says Tina Borge. Thank you. It's great to see you out there, Tina. Donaway, again, excellent show tonight. Alchemy by Angela. Whew, just a great crew out there tonight, and fantastic. If I missed anyone, oh, there's more great comments there. Let's see. I know Kate's out there. It's great to see you.
I don't think you read this one. It's just a great comment from Jenny Jen. I used to spend Friday nights killing brain cells. Now I spend them being informed with fascinating info. Right on. That's an upgrade.
Wow, fantastic.
Good
well, I enjoy, listen, you know, all the work that we do here is with the ideas from this, the way I look at it. And I get a lot of inspiration from you. So from the bottom of our heart, thank you for everything you do out there. We will see you all next week. And you know, it says end broadcast, but after all,
never really ends.
It never really ends. And remember, never let it be forgot that once there was a Camelot and there can be again. So keep that in mind and have a fantastic weekend, everybody.
God bless.
I'm going to end this properly here. Here we go.